Awesome. Okay. It is 6:03. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We do indeed have a quorum for 5, 6, 7. Sarah is the one we're missing, so she'll make it. Let's see, the purpose of the meeting tonight, the budget and committee reports. Before we accept the agenda, I do have a proposal for a small change. Section 3, the budget discussion, I'd like to propose that we swap public comment to actually be before the board goes into discussion, so that we have all facts and thoughts, and then we go about our discussion. Based on the number of people here, I'd also like to propose that we limit the comments to 2 minutes per speaker. If it turns out no one wants to speak after the third speaker, then that fourth person gets rid of it. No, so those are my two proposals, swap those two and changing it to 2 minutes in that public comment section.
So that people know there are 83 people on the 83 people on the call.
83 people were, it's fantastic. So that's my motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sam. Seconded by Sam. All those in favor, please audibly and visually, aye. 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 Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Motion passes. So we will make those changes.
It's not here.
Sarah let me know she cannot attend tonight.
Patty is on. I saw her on. That's great.
Thank you, Heather.
No. Patty, are you on? Yes. The line. She was there, right?
I am. Hello.
Hi. Were you planning on presenting tonight?
I was, and some students were prepared to come along with me, to kind of talk about the Braintree experience, but with the cancellation and the weather tonight, we would prefer to present to you the next time you're at Braintree School or at your next meeting, if that's okay. I'm happy to answer any questions you have if you have some.
Okay. So I'll go ahead, while we're still talking about the agenda, move that we postpone the presentation from Braintree School to, I'm going to say a later meeting and not be specific, so that we have a chance to look at specific agendas. Do I have a second? I'll second. Second by Neil. All those in favor, audibly, visibly?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Thank you, Patty. Okay. Before we move on to the general public comment, I just want to say a couple of things. One, I want to thank everybody for making it out tonight, getting here safely, and go even slower on the way home. Bit of cuts. But thank you all for being here, being engaged and joining us. Also, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge the bags on the tables here. Apparently these are from the high school, most specifically from, I say Zani, but Zani, okay, and Nasser, those two classes. Some gifts for us, 3D printed and created by the students. So that's pretty fantastic. I'm pretty pleased. Hoping my child doesn't take the cup that's in there. Okay, so public comment. This first public comment is more general. It's meant for people to speak on items that are not listed on the agenda that will be spoken about later. The board welcomes comments, but is not able to take any action on them other than to direct the public to the appropriate staff member or to the complaint procedure. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Time may not be ceded to another speaker. Comments are to be addressed to me, the board chair, or the board as a whole, not to any individual on the board, on the staff, or in the public. Please raise your hand and wait to speak until you are asked to by me. Please identify yourself with your first and last name and your town of residence. Please refrain from restating comments that have already been shared. You certainly can express your agreement with those previous comments. Order and decorum shall be observed by everyone. Shouting and profanity are prohibited. As the board chair, I will maintain the order and decorum of the meeting. With that, I open up public comment for items not on the agenda. Oh, that's to join the call. Online, going once, going twice. I'm going to go ahead and close the general public comment and move on to the section 3 board process. We're going to start with the budget discussion with Robin. I want to make a couple of things clear before we launch into this. There is no plan for a vote to take place at the meeting tonight. This is a discussion. This is to gather information, to ask questions, and share and learn, and it's about transparency. But we will not be voting on a budget tonight. I just want to make that very clear before we launch into this. With that, Michael?
I'm going to get us started.
Yeah.
Heather, do you have so I shared the presentation that I'm going to use tonight. So we're juggling a lot of things on this, and if we decide that we're going to share that, can you pull it up and be ready to share it? You're muted.
Yes, I have it up, and you're saying that if you indicate you want me to present?
Yes, the board has to make, the first decision the board has to make is this.
Yes.
So, board, last time we were together, you tasked the administrative team with coming back to you today, identifying, well, let me back up for a second. We brought you a level service budget for all practical purposes. That level service budget resulted in a 10.5+% increase. You looked at that and respectfully shared that you were concerned that that would not pass in the community, that we needed to do something about that. I asked you, what should we do about it? You then suggested that I come back with 2 budgets. One budget was what would happen if we lined up with what the governor had talked about and limiting budgets to a 3% growth and what he's doing at the state level. And then there was also the question about what would happen if we created a level funded budget. Okay. So what I did was I took that and I took a little liberty, and instead of just bringing you 2 budgets, I've got 10. Okay. And I've got 10 because what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through here. We're start at the level service budget that you looked at last month. And then 1%, a little bit more than 1% on that, a reduction of that is the equivalent of $250,000. Okay, so the 10 budgets brings us down to $2.5 million, and that would be a level funded budget. We're spending exactly the same amount of money. We talked last time, we were clear that that was going to mean that there would have to be cuts. There's no other way to do this. So the decision that you have to make is I can do that in one of 2 ways. Prepared for the board a pretty version that you can look at while I'm talking. And if you want to look at it while I'm talking, you have 50 copies of it here that I will also pass out to the audience, and Heather will project. The reason you might not want to do that is because if we get down to level 6 of cuts, so it's about the $1.5 million mark, and you're sitting there saying, Mike, I already know I'm not going any further than this. Whatever you're going to keep showing me, you can stop now. We've passed out and created anxiety for people and whatnot. If we do it, just let me talk you through. I can give it to you at the end if you go all the way down, or I can prepare and cut off what's there. To me, what it is it's respectful of folks, because what we will be talking about is people who are potentially going to not have a job next year. What the administrative team and I did was we identified those people And we went out and had one-on-one conversations. So those people kind of know whether they're on the list or not. But if we never get down to their name, I gotta believe that feels just a little bit better. Right? So that's up to you. So whether you want to just hear about each thing, whether you'd like to be able to follow it along. It's your first decision of the night. And I love what Hannah said, because tonight, I don't think you're making any big decisions. I think you're setting some direction tonight. So direction, not decisions. But you have to tell me what you want to do. If I give it to you, I have to give it to them, and I have to give it to the audience. If I don't give it to you, we can just talk about it.
I know what I want.
I think I do. Oh, yeah.
I want them to just talk us through it.
The abridged version.
Yeah, not necessarily be abridged.
It won't be abridged.
Not with, but not with, not all at once. I don't want all the data at once. I want it.
Yeah, we're gonna go one level at a time.
I agree.
You seem to disagree, Ryan.
I think that there's a benefit of transparency and giving the public the document. And that's really, I think, where I stand. That's about it.
It's like Rachel agrees.
I agree. And I can see how there are benefits to doing it one at a time, but I don't like the idea of withholding on folks that see that.
Mhm, yeah, I mean, knowing that it's there, it feels like a shame to not show that to the public.
Mhm. If we get to a certain step, like Michael was saying, and say, whoa, we're not going past this. Anything beyond that line doesn't then become something that's gonna be sneaked in there. So I'm concerned about something going out that would have no basis in reality, potentially. And once it's out, it can get out and out and out and out. This isn't about, for me, keeping secrets, but it is about limiting what could potentially be not reality, but mistaken for.
Sure, limiting misunderstanding is important.
I feel like Michael can give us an idea of the different budgets verbally without the unnecessary creation of hysteria, and we can still have a fiduciary responsibility to the community and have a conversation. I would say I'd like to go with the you talk us through the various versions.
The only other benefit I could see with this is that I know that we're not voting tonight. So this would give us time to really mull things over, right? If I have 10 budgets in front of me, I can take that home, really think about it, and give it additional time and really look hard at it. I also wonder if we're not giving the public enough credit in terms of we could be transparent and trust them not to misunderstand things.
So my personal response to that is that we are talking about people's livelihoods.
Mhm.
So what I have, in being transparent about myself, I had a little bit of a reaction to the word hysteria. These are valid concerns for people who are talking about their livelihoods. So in the pretty near future, if we hear 1 through 5 and we're already like this, I don't think I need to mull number 10.
Sure.
Right. That mulling isn't necessary.
That's
And
right.
what I can reflect in the minutes is exactly the things that I said. You can get the minutes of this right out of the bat with exactly what we talked about tonight. All I have to do is hit delete on the Google Doc that I've got on, for if you stop.
Got it. Rachel, as the only other person who had a potential dissension here, do you?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, I think as long as what's being said is shared, I mean, I think it's important for our community to know what's at stake with cuts. When you think about if our concern is whether to vote for the budget, we really need to know what could be cut if we were trying to go forward. That's, I mean, that's where I'm coming from with wanting the community to see potential cuts, but I agree, like, I'm on board with if it's documented that people can get after the fact, after that.
I think I also just want to acknowledge that that does put a pretty big responsibility on us to be following, to be taking notes. If it's a verbal presentation, I don't want Michael to have to file back through sentences rather than being able to look up a printed list. So we need the responsibility to pay attention. To kind of.
I feel like I get slow down.
Yeah, no, I just want to acknowledge that. So I'm actually going to take this to a vote, please, if there's a motion on the table.
I'll give to vote on these two options.
Which are you moving to vote on?
Oh, I see. Well, then no, I don't want to vote on this.
Okay. Motion from anyone else?
I'll put a motion forward to hear sort of a verbal presentation, options 1 through 10 for potential budgets for the 25-26 school year.
Thank you. Do I have a second? I'll second that. Further discussion? All those in favor, visibly, audibly, please? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously.
All right. I thank you, board. For me, this is what you just did is, I think it's a respectful thing. That's what it's meant to be. I hope it's perceived that way so that things that are never going to be on the table don't need to be passed out. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. As an educator. So, and I'd also like to start by saying, I appreciate all of the input that has gone into this. This is not easy. You know, we now have over 100 people, 105, it looks like at the moment on the call, 20-ish in the room. And so I'm really glad that there's a lot of community here because I think right now Vermont is in a really challenging place with education. I think that there's a lot of talk going on. I've been in Vermont I've been a Vermont administrator. This is my 22nd year. I've never seen it start as early or be as specific as it has been. And so I say that and appreciate that the people that are here and going to share your thoughts tonight, you're giving direction. You're helping the board understand what is the community thinking about. And the fact that there are over 100 people doing that, I think it's really great. I hope there's 100 people at the next one too. And then I think we've got to turn people out and to vote. So we've got to really figure out what is it that people want us to vote on and then put that in front of them. So thank you all. Second group I'd like to thank is the administrative team, because the administrative team had to sit down and they had to identify $2.5 million worth of cuts. And those cuts involved people that they care about, that they've worked with, that they appreciate. And so it's hard to be on all sides of this. And as we share tonight, as you get to the point that you're sharing, what I appreciate about this board is that they're ready to hear that. And I just want everybody who's going to comment tonight as I'm going through this to understand and know nobody is happy that this is what we're doing. The board let us put out a level service budget to start with. We wanted to put out a level service budget to start with, and they just think that it's not something that's going to pass in the town. So with that said, they've got decisions that they've got to make tonight. And they've already made one of them. So here you go. So as I said, we, the administrative team, after $2.5 million worth of cuts were identified, we then sat and prioritized them as an administrative team. Please know as I go through this that by prioritizing them in $250,000 increments, there's probably a little bit of wiggle room on some of them. I mean, I thought it made sense for the board to get 10 different budgets at a 98765. And so what that means is, in some cases, we took some small things and they moved them further down the list of where they could land or would land, depending on what the board ultimately says. But conceptually, the big things that are in each of these areas, they're in the areas. And there's not anything that's more than a level lower or higher than where we put it if we weren't trying to do this in a 1% increment. Okay. Also understand, there was lots of conversation amongst the administrative team going about this. We debated some of these. When we get to different places, does this belong here? Does it belong the next level down? Won't surprise me if 130 people might prioritize things slightly differently. So understand that and be okay with that, I think, and then share your thoughts about it. Okay. So the first cut, first tier, I have a total of 252,400 in this tier. The first cut to that is I would eliminate the Director of Human Resources position and convert it to, it's an administrative position. I would convert it to a benefits coordinator position. That would save $50,000. One of the things that's a little bit tricky about where we are right now is we don't have a contract for where we're just started negotiations. And so one of the things that the board has to do is it has to make an estimated guess as to where we might settle. And so I put money in the budget. I talked to the two negotiating committees. From the first budget, I'm going to pull $136,000. And I still think we're going to settle a contract at a place that people think is fair and reasonable and okay. There was 136,000. The next item in this group is we had a driver budgeted in the transportation part of the budget. And it actually turns out that driver's an extra driver. We've combined some routes and changed some things up. So we were able to eliminate that position. There's nobody in that position at the moment. Randolph, I'm sorry, that was 33,000. Randolph and Brookfield have a farm to school program that they're taking out of the budget at this level for $9,000. We have $20,000 in special ed evaluations. In a line there, that line has had $20,000 in it when we finished the year for the last couple of years. So we're right sizing it, saying we're gonna, before we're cutting positions, we're making sure that we're really getting tight on the things that we have. And then the last thing that's on here is Braintree is able to reduce their supply lines by 4,400. Again, the grand total in that section was $252,400. There was one position that was cut. It was an administrator, and no other filled positions cut that month.
One question, the special ed cells, that was RES and
That's everybody that's across. These guys are in there. Our.
Oh, that was the part of school.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question about special ed, you know,
Yeah.
so always special ed for me. So is that's like assuming that we won't need to do more evaluations than we have been doing? Like, how much does that vary year to year?
So we think we've got the money and we think that we'll figure it out if, we're comfortable. I think almost all of the administrators that were part of building this are here and are supportive of that. I know Kayla, I'm sure Kayla's on there somewhere. And we're comfortable with this. We don't think we're going to get to a spot where that's going to be a problem. And if it is, maybe I should say this at this point. One of the things that's interesting as a board is you go through and get a line by line budget. The voters approve as a top line budget. It says, this is how much you can spend. I will guarantee you that you've never had a year where we spent exactly what was in the line by line budget. And next year won't be any different. We'll spend more in some of the lines, less than others, and we'll make it balanced. But I will also probably promise you, knowing Robin over here, you probably haven't had very many years where you spent above the top line number. And nor will next year be that way.
Now that Rachel and I both asked a question, I'll just while he's going through the presentation, clarifying questions are great, but discussion questions we'll keep until after we've heard from the public, just like you and I just did, but interruptions are fine. They're just going to clarify.
And just to be clear, what do we call this level? I wrote it down on my papers.
I call it level one.
Level one, thank you. That way we all have a common parlance here that we can reference later.
Right, so what we're looking, what's that?
It represents a 1%.
It represents 1%.
Okay, thank you.
I have another set of questions. So the extra driver, is that like, I know we're down, like, because I'm not good at setting beyond clarification. I'm trying to understand, like, I know that I know visit drivers are part of what kids are having some kids are having such a long drive to and from school right now. Is that basically saying that would become permanent, or is it that there's like another extra position?
I think that what we're basically saying with this, is we've got a couple people who are ready to come on board. And they just haven't finished the training so they can actually drive a regular school bus at this point.
So it doesn't.
I'm sorry.
It's not maintaining the current driver number that we have at
So
this
I think this allows us to bring some of those people that are in the process of being trained on.
Got it, okay.
Okay, so it's a great question. It's one that maybe Heather will help me out here too. Will you write that question down so that we make sure that we talk with Craig and Robin and whatnot after the school?
Yes.
Okay. So it's level one, represents 1%. And reminds me that what hopefully you see in that is our attempt was to impact the least amount of students in the least negative way that we can. And when you look at that, I feel like we did that pretty okay there.
I have one more clarifying question
Yeah.
about the farm to school program for 9K. Does that completely eliminate that program, or does it shave it?
No, we shaved it in the first presentation, and this would completely eliminate that unless we funded it with grants. This removes it from the local budget.
Thank you. Completely.
Okay. Level two. Level two is going to represent $250,700. And in that level, we took 250,700. So we took $12,000 in uniforms. That's from facilities. For 12,000. And then we have a facilities position that has been open. Can't fill it. And so at that point, we decided that that would be a position that we take at this point. Salary and benefits, 91,200. The late bus. The late bus is budgeted at 85,000. I think the one that was really hard in this level was world travel. And so when Lisa looked at when Lisa looked at that, she talked about not eliminating world travel, but eliminating the 31,000 that comes out of the school budget for that. And then allowing fundraising and whatnot to supplement.
Just a reminder that during the presentation, we're not taking questions from the attendees, just clarifying from the board. After that, the public will have a chance to make a limited 2-minute comments. Just for people online, I've seen a couple of raised hands.
Okay. Gardening in the budget, and I think the gardening is sort of the landscaping around the buildings and whatnot. That's 5,000. Pre-K supplies for 6,500. There's money in the support services line. Again, this is in the high school budget, and they've got money in that budget that allows them to bring in presenters, and they have felt that they can do that in a different way and be okay with that $10,000.
10,000?
Yep.
Thank you.
4,000 in field trips at this level. And then subscriptions to things like mystery science and writing and RAS kits. That's going to get moved to other parts of local budgets and absorbed in those. For 6,000. So you're at 250,700 there at level 2. No field positions reduced.
I'd like to ask a clarifying question. So this would bring us from our level service budget at a 10.5% increase to 8.5-ish% increase from our budget last year.
True. Okay.
Board, other clarifications?
All right. So then we're going to move on to the level 3 reductions. In this place, we are taking $4,000 out of the RES field trip line.
Wait a minute, can you give us a total of what this
Oh, sorry.
tier is?
The total of this tier is going to be 252,621. Okay. And it starts with $4,000 of RES field trips. The next reduction here is art supplies in the amount of 1,500. The next reduction is a reduction of nursing staff. This year, we moved to a full-time nurse in each building. And what this has done is we've, in the first budget, we actually reduced the nurse at the high school. They had 1.5 nurses at the high school. That was 0.5 of a nurse. This is 1. This is right now, Brookfield and Braintree each have a full-time nurse. 90 students in each building. Okay.
So I'm sorry. So the reduction at the high school is 1.5 to 1.
That was in the previous budget, yes.
Okay.
The difference that you're seeing now is the 1 FTE, and it's the nurse that Brookfield and Braintree each have 1. It'll be reduced back to the half-time and the person traveling back and forth. Depending on some of the decisions that you and the community make potentially.
Was the savings?
There's a Braintree Brook, dues and fees for 5,000. Did I tell you the number for the nurses?
No.
Sorry. The nurses are 102,800. That's salary and benefits. Braintree dues and fees. That's on the call if you want more details about that, but I think it's a line that she hasn't really used in the past. A library para. It's at the high school. Sorry, the Braintree dues and fees is 5,000. A library para, and that's at the high school, is 37,140. So this next line is, when we talked about the first budget being for practical purposes, a level service budget. In that budget, we had $85,000 of new special education. There's 3 of them, anticipating that we might need that. We've taken it out. So these are 3 open positions that aren't even contemplated this year. And that was pretty much the, you'd say, for all practical purposes, a level service budget is one of the big pieces of life practically. Okay?
85.
85,150. And then the high school has a line for 17,000 that allows for research and development. That lets them try different experimental kinds of things curricularly, programmatically. And we didn't feel like we could leave that in when we started taking positions. That's where we're at. That brings you to the 252,621.
What was the number for the research?
17,000.
I want to take a breath, just to let people sit, and think about if they want to go on to a little bit longer.
While you're thinking about going on to level 4, I will tell you that in the handout that I prepared, this is the spot where I have a note highlighted in bright yellow to me. And I will share with you that from an administrative perspective, we believe that after level 3, the board may want to consider a plan that reallocates how buildings are used. And I would go with more detail, but you'll understand why when I tell you what level 4 is.
Micah, I had a hard time hearing.
Yeah.
what you said. I'm sorry.
Okay. I will force whatever I can out of this voice. So after level, there's a note in here that says after level 3, but we've talked about as an administrative team is that after level 3, the board may want to consider how it uses a plan that reallocates how it uses buildings throughout the district.
Okay.
Because we do have I know that you asked me to bring you a level funded budget. I took that to mean that you probably just wanted me to reduce what was in the budget, but we couldn't help but to say, there's another way that we can do this that we think is better for kids and gets you to the same end. And better for teaching and learning throughout the district. But we didn't really say that in our last meeting that we could contemplate changing the way that we use buildings. That's kind of a big deal. Kind of not a lot of time to do that. Okay. All right. Level 4 only has 2 reductions in them. The first one is eliminating pre-K for 3-year-olds at RES for $202,270. Here's why. 3-year-olds, pre-K for 3-year-olds is not required that schools provide that. In fact, right now legislation is being considered where pre-K for 3-year-olds would all go to childcare centers, whereas pre-K for 4-year-olds would all go to schools. In addition, when the state counts the pre-K student, they count it for less than 1 FTE of the student. Right, it's a pretty small percentage. Pretty big impact. When we talk about that, we're talking about 1 teaching position, 3 para-educator positions, all filled. To round that out, that was 202,270. To round that out, we have the Brookfield Library reduction. Another teaching position, 0.2 of an FTE, so 1 day a week. And that is 38,900 salary and benefits. That takes you to that level is 241,170.
Board clarifying question?
Eliminate pre-K, was that just for Randolph? Or that was throughout the
For
district?
3-year-olds.
3-year-olds. Just for 3-year-olds or throughout the whole district?
I think the reason that we can do that at Randolph is because Randolph has enough students that when we have enough, we group the 3-year-olds together. Whereas the other programs, I believe they're intermixed.
So we would maintain 3-year-old slots in 2 elementary schools and remove it from our larger elementary school.
Trying to pre-K under Act 166, students can go anywhere for pre-K that they would like to go. 10 hours of pre-K, those pre-K centers get reimbursed by the Orange Southwest School District.
So what other local options would parents have if they did not work at Gifford and had access to the wellness staff?
I think at this exact moment, it's somewhat limited. However, there is a pre-K center that's slotted to open up towards the interstate with 75 slots.
But not all pre-K stuff. They're not all.
They're not all 3 years.
With 75 childcare slots or 75 pre-K slots?
Hannah, and a question regarding process here.
Kara actually is our pre-K guru. Kara, you want to help us understand a little bit better based on the questions?
Sure. So I'll start with the center that's opening up in Randolph by VTC. The last I heard, it would be 27 pre-K slots that are opening. Any other, can you ask me go back and ask me some other clarifying questions? There were quite a few.
Would that be for 4K or 3K or both?
It sounds like their center would be a multi-age center for 27 slots for pre-K.
Thank you. Thank you, Kara.
I have a question regarding
Happy
that
to speak
process.
to any other questions around pre-K for our district as well.
We have established that at a certain point when we have decided we have heard enough. I think you phrased it as no more. Okay, I'm not uncle, right? What is our process for that? Do we move to stop hearing or how do we go about that? Simply do that, we just stop.
You could, anyone can make a motion at any time, at which time, we would move on to, public comment. So just to recap where we're at this point. We got to level 4, which is the equivalent of about 4% from the 10.5-ish percent that was originally presented last meeting, putting it at a 6.5-ish percent increase from last year's budget.
Expenditure budget increase. I can't tell you what that's going to do to the tax rate yet.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
So this would be looking at that about 6.5% increase of what our expenditure budget was for this school year.
Correct.
When would you be able to tell us what it does to your tax rate?
When the state releases all of the numbers that we need to be able to do that.
When can we anticipate that?
Could be as early as December 15th. Sometimes it's gone into January. We're close. One of the big numbers right now that we're disputing with the state is our long-term weighted average daily membership. They have our long-term weighted average daily membership going down by 200. And we know that's not right. So we're arguing with them. You can imagine that that 200 has a huge impact.
Before we go any further, just about the 4 letters we've gone through, Robin, do you have anything that you feel like was not accepted? Okay. Unless I hear a motion from others or myself.
I'll second.
Made by Rachel Fish, seconded by Emil. Further discussion? All those in favor?
May I ask a question? on
Sure, yeah.
further
in the
discussion?
first- Yeah.
So you're stopping at the end of 4 or at the end of 3?
We finished.
Well, we
finished. Presented, we don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I hear that.
Like we're,
Okay, I got you. I got you. So
Except-
we're just talking about what you want to hear right now.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, we are not accepting levels 1 through 4.
Right.
Right.
We just are
We just heard-
voting right now that we don't want to hear about anything.
You've heard it. I think the way to say this is you've heard enough.
Yes.
You think that to go to the end of level 4 is either the right amount or too much. You don't need anything beyond that.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion on the table audibly and visibly, please. Aye.
Bye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Abstentions? So how many do we have here? So that was 6 and 1. The motion passes.
So I'm going to stop with the levels. Am I stopping and not talking about any of the other possibilities around reconfiguration?
Between
Or are
transform.
you wanting to consider those?
I don't hear about it.
Sure. Yep, we're done.
Could you move that? That's, can you move that? Could you make a motion? That I would like to hear. Yeah, about specifically what the
Reallocating the way that we use
building
buildings.
is. I'm good. Mike shares with us ideas about building allocation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? That passed unanimously.
Okay, so I'm going to share this at an incredibly high level because we had the ability, we knew what was down on the list here. We knew that we needed to have conversations with lots of people, and we did that. We didn't know whether you were going to be interested in hearing about this or not hearing about this at this point. given the time frame that we have available. But as we looked, and I think probably prompting right at the level that you're at, where we're saying, man, when we have to lose pre-K, is there another way for us to do this? And so we looked at saying, if we moved our pre-K and K students to Braintree, right? So all the pre-K,
Obviously.
all the K. So what we're doing in this particular exercise as administrators is we're saying, what happens when we increase the professional density of grade alike classes in one location? Right? What it lets us do is it lets us maneuver things around and have class sizes that meet the class size policy more robustly than what they currently do. Okay? So move the pre-K and the K to Braintree. Move the 6th grade out of RES to RU.
Just RES for all 6th grade.
Well, because in just a minute, I'm moving
Oh.
Braintree to RES and closing. I'm closing, sorry, Brookfield to RES and closing Brookfield and not using that building.
So this is the level 4.
This is what we would talk about before we got to level 4. We think that we think that if you do that, it lets us look at changes in a different way and potentially get us down without, like, you just lost, I mean, you lost pre-K, you lost a library.
Right.
You know, you've lost the things up until there. This lets us bring our staffing into a smaller profile. So in other words, instead of having a pre-K here, 3 at RES and 1 at Brookfield, we can do 4 pre-Ks, for instance. Right? So there's a staffing advantage to being able to do that. And it allows us to provide the same high quality education, maybe in some ways, we have all the pre-K teachers together at that point, able to talk with each other, plan together, learn together, and do things. So there's some real advantages to doing something along that line. So the bottom line is high level, what we'd be looking at doing is repurposing Braintree to be a kindergarten pre-K, closing Brookfield,
Closing Brookfield's pre-K.
closing Brookfield School, closing Brookfield School. Yep. So then we have grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at RES. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 at RU.
What happened if Braintree to 1 through 5?
They moved to RES.
All of them.
Yes.
So Braintree is in this one proposal that's being put. The Braintree building is a building for pre-K and K students.
Correct.
RES building is for district students of 1 through 5.
Correct.
Thank you.
So when we look at the numbers of what that would look like, there's a whole lot underneath this, but the numbers of what it looks like is save 1.2 million.
That would say 1.2.
I'd say 1.2 million. Maybe more.
And in thinking about this idea, does your administrative team think that it's realistic for that kind of thing to happen by August?
if it is voted for, we can open it in August. That's what you decide you're gonna do. The practicality, the actually doing the work to be together in those places is doable for the start of the next school year.
Is there data about how students do, particularly elementary students, and in proximity of their school to their? You know,
I do not look data that looks like that.
So essentially, this reallocation would be in lieu of options 1 through 4.
We could do that in lieu of 1 through 4. We didn't plug it in until we got to the first place we contemplated that was at the end of 3.
I see.
Right, so we, as an administrative team, we went through 3, and when we had to give that pre-K for 3-year-olds, there was a lot of talk about, is this, we've got this other option that we're sort of playing with in the background. Do we share that with the board at this level?
So if we went, hate just talking about this like it's levels, but if we went 1 through 3 and that, because I can't do math in my head right now.
We had about 2 million.
And how much did 10 and a half percent?
2.5 million. About, Robin's good with that. I played fast with that. So that and when you got down to 3 plus this would get you to roughly a 2 to 3% increase. Into one of the target areas you asked us to get into, which was why we felt like we could also fit there. So that if you took that, we're in at least one of the target areas that you asked for.
Yep,
Master Live.
good info. I think I've heard enough.
Okay. That was lovely. Thank you for sharing that, Ryan. I haven't. So, does anyone else on the board have anything to clarify about the presentation thus far? Okay. So at this point, we will move into the public comment section on this presentation. I wish I could do a sign up, but I just don't see a very good way to do that. So I'm going to try to go, if there's like people who want to talk, I'm going to try to go 1 and 1. There will be a 2-minute limit to people who want to speak. And if you are mid-sentence at 2 minutes, I need you to stop that sentence mid-sentence, because I can make a sentence last for 6 minutes. So clearly, I also want to remind people, preamble, you can restate things that have already been said, or sorry, you can agree with things that have already been said. Try not to restate them, just so we can hear from as many people as possible. Please do not comment on other people's while they're speaking. When someone gets 2 minutes, they get their whole 2 minutes. The board will not respond to comments as they're being made. And I think that's it. So I'm going.
Did you ask people to introduce themselves?
First and last name, the town in which you reside. Yeah, those same as general. I'm going to start in the room and then I'm going to go virtual. And again, I'm going to go back and forth. Ron, you have your hand up first.
Ron Wolf, Randolph. I didn't hear any clarification in that last little repurposing of buildings proposal about positions lost under that proposal.
That is true. You did not hear anything about what that was. And the reason that you didn't is because I have work to do. If the board, we finish this meeting and the board says, we want to hear more about it, then they're going to say that to me before we walk out of here. They're going to come into the meeting in January, I would imagine, wanting to hear more about that. I think that's probably a respectful way to go, because when we left the last meeting, I don't think there was any real, they said, create a budget that gets into these spots. They didn't say I couldn't close a building or repurpose a building. But, you know, I was ready to get to the level that they talked about without doing that. I think this allows them to be able to say, hey, we had a conversation here in a public session. We didn't go too deep into that conversation. If they want to go deeper, I and the administrative team have quite a bit of work to do between now and the January meeting. And we'll come back and we'll do something very similar to this, to give you the details, just like I was giving you the details here. I have it. It's ready.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Frank Landry?
Hi, my name is Frank Landry. I am a resident of Randolph. My two daughters, Diana and Eleanor Landry, both attend Brookfield. They both went through the preschool program, and I think personally, any cuts to any preschool, pre-K program are not a good idea. Just personal opinion, not trying to start anything. I see the preschool program as a cornerstone, and that if you were to do anything against that, you would be affecting all students going through the school there forward. I would think that any 3-year-old fortunate enough to go to preschool has gained an invaluable experience. I can say the same for both my daughters. And overall, it just makes me generally sad that preschool was even being considered for cuts in the first place. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. In the room? Yes.
Everyone, Kyle Bauer, Brookfield. And I think, you know, generally as a community, I think we need to establish what we think are priorities for our district. You know, when I hear things like cutting art supplies, cutting research and development, cutting field trips, I think we really need to be clear about what we value as a community and convey that to our school board. You know, the idea of possibly closing Brookfield, saving $1.2 million. I mean, I think just off the top of my head, Randolph Union uses hundreds of thousands of dollars in heating oil a year. So I think, again, thinking about what our priorities are as a community, we need to just keep that in mind. And I think that will help this conversation move forward. But personally, after school programming, guests at Brookfield, my daughter's in kindergarten at Brookfield, art, I mean, these are essential parts of her daily learning experience. And for me, personally, I have no problem paying a little bit more on my property taxes to support our educators and our schools and provide our teachers and our students with what they need to be successful. So I just would encourage everyone to just really look at this holistically. Thank you.
Thank you. Emma?
Hi, this is Emma. I prepared remarks for 3 minutes, so you will have to stop me. I'm Emma Janicki. I teach science and social studies, grades 4 to 6 at Braintree, and I live in Montpelier. I'm very concerned about the possible overhauls to our district. 3 points that I hoped to focus on would be how paraprofessionals were included in calculating instructional staff to student ratios, the possible elimination of paraprofessional positions, and what is the actual return on investment of administrative positions to student achievement. I would have liked to see the budget documents for transparency so we all could more accurately comment and discuss what we would prioritize instead of discussing cuts to material resources. why are we not having conversations about cutting those expensive administrative positions? So I'll start there. I would encourage the district to do a cost benefit analysis of administrative positions. There are positions which were only created last year and some of which have very little impact on teachers and students day to day. I'd encourage the district to survey teachers so we can express our views regarding which positions provide tangible support to both teachers and students. And I wouldn't hesitate to guess that teachers find more benefit from their direct coworkers like paras, social emotional behavior teams, interventionists, and unified arts teachers than admin who never provide instruction to students and rarely work with us teachers directly. These positions are among the most costly in our district, and yet their return on investment is questionable. It seems like I still have time, so I also want to discuss the importance of paraprofessional positions. It would be detrimental to student success and teacher efficacy. Paras are the least paid and yet provide some of the most valuable support in our schools in terms of return on investment. They cost very little, even though they should get paid substantially more, which is maybe why we can't fill those positions. And they provide a lot. Eliminating paraprofessionals.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Emma. I'm so sorry. I'm very sorry. I don't know how to change that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I will say, while I understand the use of emojis, it literally goes over someone's face and is quite distracting. So I get it, and I'm not trying to criticize the use of them, but in trying to listen to someone and watch their face and facial expressions, it's quite distracting to have emojis going on the screen. So if you feel you could refrain from that, I would appreciate it. Okay, in the room. Larry, yes.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Witz, I live in Randolph, and just to clarify, at your next meeting in January, you'll be also be informed by the state numbers to have a sense of how the tax rate connects, because it's not a completely straightforward calculation that if we cut this amount from our budget, we're going to cut this amount from our taxes, right? It's more complicated than that. So at your next meeting, we get numbers from the state, they'll have a much better idea of what that relationship actually is. That will inform this whole conversation. Correct? I'm now asking the superintendent.
Perfect. Yes, I think, Larry, one of the things that is concerning right now is the way that the numbers are coming that we're looking at already. You could be at the 0% increase and still seeing an increase in taxes. The numbers are not coming favorably right now.
So it's kind of a preliminary discussion. And once we have this other data, we'll know a lot more about what the actual effects of cutting money from the budget will be on the tax rate.
True story.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Online, Katie Van Houten.
Hi there, I am here. Just give me a second. You can count this as my time.
No.
All right, am I good?
We can hear you.
You can hear me, you can see me. All right, my name is Katie Van Houten.
Can't see you, Katie, sorry, if that's important to you.
Now you can.
There it is. Yep. Hi.
All right. My name is Katie Van Houten. I live in Braintree, and I'm an academic interventionist at RES. This is my 14th year in the district and my 19th year working as an educator at the elementary level. I've seen the school go through many changes in budget allocations, but one thing has remained the same. The OSSD district's community members and board members have always supported educators. I have hope they will continue to do so despite the current and future economic and political crises facing public education. In my role as an academic interventionist across grade levels, even before ESSER funds, I have always felt as though I could not meet the needs of students. There are far too many students who are in need of academic support and too few adults to work with them. An academic interventionist's role is to work with Tier 2 students, which are the students who need some temporary support to help them reach Tier 3, meaning they're meeting the proficiency standards. However, because of the high level of needs at RES, I work primarily with students who are either on IEPs or who are very low academically but are not yet qualified for an IEP. All too often, Tier 2 students do not receive intervention. There just isn't time in my schedule. There are days when our admin assistant cannot find substitute teachers to fill the classrooms, I realize the pay offered to substitute teachers has finally been increased to match what other districts have been offering, but the number of substitutes, I lost my place, I assure you, has not increased. I am asked to sub for classroom teachers only when absolutely necessary, because when I do, my intervention services are suspended. Of course, I'm happy to help my school in whatever way I can, and I'm not alone. With our current staffing situation, services for students are often suspended. As I am currently moving into the role of a long-term substitute classroom teacher, it is uncertain how many of my services will be suspended and for how long. This should be very concerning for parents, the school board, and the community. Whatever changes need to be made post-ESSER funding, please prioritize the number of adults who are in front of students.
Katie, I need to stop you there. I'm very sorry.
I got 2 more sentences.
Thank you. In the room? Okay, yes, please.
Joe Bennett from Braintree. I just wanted a quick clarification from Michael. I know you're saying you're high, very high level. I understand when it comes to building changes and stuff, but you did spit out a specific number of million plus.
1.2 million.
1.2. Does that number that you gave out, does that take into consideration how much money it's going to take to make the changes in such a short span of time, as far as this building is going to have to go through a lot of renovation to make it meet the needs of pre-K throughout it, because there's going to have to be changes to desk height and everything like that. Is that in there? Does that have to be figured in later? Does that shrink your $1 million?
I don't think it does.
Okay.
So I would say that I gave you very precisely. I don't have it right in front of me anymore. I pushed it away, right?
No, that's fine.
But the dollar amounts are not.
Not going to shift. That's not going to shift based on just changing the actual change.
I would expect to be 1.2 million-ish in savings.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great question.
Thank you. Stephanie Cole? Oh, you're still muted.
You're right. Sorry. Haven't done this in a minute. I would like to say just maybe one thing negative and a lot of things positive. I'm so happy to be at Braintree. There's a reason that we are number 6, I think, in the state of Vermont, educating students. We're working really hard, and that's important, and I think it should be stated. I'm coming from a school district that had 24 elementary schools, 5 junior highs, 3 high schools, 23,000 students, and 2,000 teachers. We didn't have an assistant superintendent. We didn't have 2 sped admins. I just think that a lot of things were thrown out there, like uniforms and field trips, when there are jobs that are making a lot more money that weren't really talked about. So while that is negative, I love being a part of this community. I live in Braintree, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. In the room? Yep.
I don't know if I can go. No. Hello, my God, Randolph, Vermont. I lived in Randolph, Vermont. I've taught in the district for 10 years. My job is not even one of the jobs that would be on the line, but my fabulous coworkers are on the. It hurts that preschool is the one that's attacked. That made everybody's stomach drop at stage 4. Like what Emma and Stephanie said, there's so many other things that could be prioritized before preschool. Preschool's budget, classroom budget was cut, but nobody else's was. It's just kind of an ongoing vibe of administrators in our district, but I don't think that that's how the community feels. I think the community values and has a ton of respect for what our preschool program does. I also want to say taking the 3-year-olds out of Randolph makes very little sense. That is where most of our families who are living in low income who need to walk can come to, where we can help them. I think, sorry, this is just a mess. This is the first time I'm even hearing a lot of this stuff, but cutting one of our teachers seems silly when we have a special educator position that couldn't be filled. So your teachers are providing the special ed services to these students on IEPs or paras. Because we have 2 special eds in the admin office and no one in our classrooms actually doing the services that the kids have on their IEPs. And yeah, I don't know, I think I will leave it there for now, but I just think that seeing the whole budget and reprioritizing is maybe a better step than just stopping here and taking preschool out, I guess, is how I feel.
Thank you.
Oh, and one more. The OCCP has been talking about coming to the Randolph for 6 years since I was, talking about having my own kids, and it has yet to come. So I think putting all of our kids can go to this preschool that's maybe going to be here is pretty wishful thinking. Last I heard, they were $2 million from their start date, and we just lost a preschool across the street, RCP, that staffed 20 preschool kids. So it doesn't seem like our number is growing for preschool kids, and it's really important.
I need to stop. Thank you.
I'm just getting my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Kara?
Hi, I am the principal of Brookfield Elementary School and also the OSSD preschool administrator. I am going to speak to specific cuts. So I'll first start with the 3-year-old pre-K. Cutting the 3-year-old pre-K will have a long-lasting impact at RES in terms of social skills, relationship building, play skills, and early exposure to math and literacy. But as they move to kindergarten and beyond, having a pre-K3 program helps students learn how to be students through a structured experience, as well as having 4-year-olds for role models in the classroom. This will affect approximately 15 kids in their education throughout their school years as they follow. This is a crucial time for families to make connections with teachers and the school, and it can be challenging and worrying time for parents as they get their students ready for the school experience. And having our 3-year-old program helps build that relationship with families in the school and aids in that transition into the school setting. It will also greatly impact the accessibility for 3-year-olds for receiving services. When 3-year-olds are in our programs, they're able to provide them with speech and occupational therapy and physical therapy that much more easily. This easy access helps students develop these skills more quickly, and then if they are not within our program. Also want to talk about reducing our Brookfield position to a 0.2. This will impact the upkeep of our library spaces, as well as our ELA classrooms, where our librarian is pushing in to support literacy instruction during the other days that they're not holding classes. In addition, we've seen a benefit to having a full-time nurse, and it eases the worries and increases the care to our kids because they're receiving medical care from a certified individual for the other half of the time that we were not having somebody covered when we had a half-time person in previous years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kara. That was precise. In the room? Okay. Ted?
Me, Tev, online?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yep. No, okay. Thank you. Hi, my name's Tev Kelman. I'm a social studies teacher at the high school, and I'm also the co-president of our local association. I guess first off, I just want to say, just to thank the board and Michael and everyone for having this very difficult conversation in a way where I feel like folks are being recognizing the gravity of what's being proposed here, and I appreciate that this is hard work. That being said, I just want to echo a couple of things that have been said and maybe add a little bit to it. You know, I think, as I think you've heard from educators and parents who've spoken up, I think talk to anybody who works in a school, in this district, and I think you will hear that we don't feel like there's any fat to cut in terms of folks who are student facing, and I appreciate that we didn't get past level 4 because I worry about what may lay beyond it. And I appreciate that the board is thinking that way. But I also just want to underscore that even up to level 4, there's some real impact to the students. And that's not to disparage the attempts of folks to prioritize. And I don't want to belabor those points because I think other people can make it more eloquently. But what I do want to say is that I think that with a lot of those things, I'm thinking of the late bus, I'm thinking of the eliminated para positions, I'm thinking of world travel, that the students who will be most impacted are most economically disadvantaged students. And often the students whose learning has been the most disrupted by the pandemic, whose effects we're still dealing with. And there's just no way around that. So recognize that y'all are in a very difficult position, but I think
I'm gonna have to stop you there.
I appreciate what the gentleman said about voting our budget as a document of our values, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. In the room. Yeah?
My name is Liz Wright. I'm from Randolph. I work at RES. I am a building para, which I do everything. And mostly I am a sub when they don't have subs. When I am subbing, like one interventionist says, she has to sub if they don't have any more subs. We can't afford to lose people. We don't have enough paras as it is. We have a lot of students who have behaviors, and if there's a lot of cuts, it will hurt these students. They will fall through the cracks. There are some that are falling through the cracks now. And my heart goes out for them. I work with them, so I see this every day. So we really need to think about what we're going to cut, and paras and staff are not something that we need to cut.
Thank you. Julie Marie Bristol.
Hello, so I am Julie Marie Bristol. I am a special educator at Randolph Elementary School. I agree with pretty much most of what's been said. I think that oftentimes when a budget is being discussed, the first positions eliminated are student-facing positions. As you are hearing, certainly at Randolph Elementary School, we are already skin and bones in terms of staffing. We have very many needs and very high and intensive needs among our children, and we do not have enough staff to cope with those needs. We cannot get subs to come in when staff are out. We often are not able to do our jobs to our best ability because we are having to plug holes elsewhere in the school. I also think that talking about closing school buildings then means that children have to move from the communities in which they live, which can be harmful to them. Closing preschool, I think, would just be awful for the reasons that Cara has outlined. We already have children who have gone through preschool who still have difficulty integrating into kindergarten because of needs, because they come from impoverished families, because they come from traumatic backgrounds. I think we need to talk as a community about the best ways to create a budget that does not create the damage that these kinds of cuts will appear to do. And I understand that it's a difficult conversation and that it's difficult to come up with the numbers that you feel you need, but you really ought to be in the schools looking at what the reality is when you are talking
Julie
about.
Marie, I'm very sorry. I'm going to have to stop you there.
Thank you.
Thank you. In the room? Going back online, Sadie Lightford.
Hello, my name is Sadie Layford. I'm a Randolph community member and a parent, have my third child going through this system. I was really proud of the administrators for coming up with 3 levels that cut the least amount of people. I was surprised, however, at the amount of administrator positions that weren't looked at to be cut. I think if you're really looking to serve students, you start at the top and then you go down. I also would say I noticed that there was a lot of schools making cut, but one school in particular that wasn't mentioned with any of these cuts. And so I don't know if that was an oversight, but it just seemed like a lot of cuts were made in a lot of buildings, except for one, it seemed like. And my last thing I would just like to say is that school nurses do a lot more than just medically take care of children. I think they take a lot off of students, take a lot off of parents. We offer medical care at the school. We offer dental care at the school. And we also support parents in getting health insurance and all of that. So I think I am with Karen that I really think the need for a registered nurse in each building is really something that shouldn't be considered to be personal feeling. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gotta keep checking in the room. All right. Okay, online, Sonia Katna.
Hi.
I'm not going to turn off the, sorry, Sonia, let me introduce you for one moment. The chat online thing, I feel, is giving an unfair advantage to people to continue with comments that perhaps in the room people wouldn't have. So again, I'm not going to do anything technical, mostly because I don't know how. But if you could refrain from using the chat feature, I would really appreciate it. Sonia, I'm so sorry, please.
So normally I would have my face on, but like I have been sick. So anyway, I'm Sonia Katna. I live in Waterbury, Vermont. I've been in this district for my 19th year. And I just want to shout out to the preschool because it has been such an amazing part of my life this year because it's, I don't know, preschool is so important. And it's been, being in Brookfield, being in a small school has just been awesome. And I just feel like we need to think about like what jobs are we taking away? Like maybe we need to take away jobs that aren't like you know, jobs that aren't like sorry, supporting the kids. Like those are the most important jobs that people have, right? Like teachers, paras, administrators. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Room. Okay, online, Jen L.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm Jen Larkin. I'm a Brookfield community member. I appreciate the discussion here. I apologize, I won't have quite as eloquent of a statement as some of our speakers. But honestly, the idea of closing Brookfield Elementary, moving pre-K or kindergarten out of Brookfield or out of other schools is just unacceptable to me as a community member. Brookfield and its staff contribute so much to this community and their students. The students are receiving a just phenomenal education. They have a unique community within the school where the staff and the students are supporting one another. They're learning, they're growing, they're developing their life skills, particularly at such a young age. As a parent, I've seen my own student just blossom within the school with his teachers, with his friends. I could see his growth and development just rocket forward scholastically and socially. Brookfield's just had a profound impact on our family, and I really worry that cuts to the school budget are going to harm our students. I want to urge us to consider also that there's going to be hardship invoked on parents and families should any school closures, pre-K overhauls occur. Consider the transportation considerations, consider the hours considerations. I know budgeting is difficult. I get that. I know it's painful to see increases, but as a community, we need to understand that our children need to be invested in. They've got to be set up for success here, particularly in a community, in a state with a population that needs younger people living here and staying here long term. We've got to make that investment into our community's future by investing in these schools. And I don't think that these cuts, these closures that are put forth are the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking in the room, you're all looking over there, but we're good? We're good. Okay. Callie Hastings?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Callie Hastings from Brookfield. Just quick background, I went to Brookfield Elementary School as a little person, graduated from RUHS, and then went back and taught at Brookfield for a short period of time. So gone through it. Brookfield Elementary School were the best years of my life, as was the case for many of my current friends that I love. It was like the pinnacle of their lifetime. So I think there's just the anecdotal personal experience of living it. But I also have like a very serious business mindset, ran a business for 17 years in this area. And I'm very interested in all of this from a budgetary perspective and a puzzle perspective of how many ways can you do this puzzle to get to the goals and the priorities of the community. And I haven't seen all the versions. I personally do not like the version of cutting out Brookfield at all. It's a big reason I've stayed in this area. And why I came back here when I was 22 was to have my family here and to have kids go to Brookfield. And I actually had the thought the other day, like, would I stay in Brookfield if the elementary school was not there? And I was like, I don't actually know that I would. I would probably move to a community where there was a small school. And nothing against Randolph. I went there in high school, but I would choose to probably go to another area for elementary at least. I've also seen, I live on the same road that I grew up on. I've seen it go from a really vibrant place with tons of kids to a retirement community back to a strong family community. My whole street is full of young families and kids, and it is amazing. And it has changed everything. And people literally are moving here because there's this school and there's this great energy that we didn't have for a very long time. And I would be really sad to see Brookfield just go fully into a retirement community where families can't live. So I think those are just my personal comments. I also have like practical questions.
I'm gonna have to stop you there, Callie. I'm very sorry to interrupt. So I have 4 people who made it in with their hands raised online. When I wrote down I was going to make an executive decision here to put an end to public comment, just because we're already real off schedule and the board still needs to have its conversation. So Martha, Emily, Sarah, and Kayla, you'll be our last commenters. Martha, if you'd like to take it away.
Sure. I guess the only thing I would I stepped out for about 10 minutes, and so I don't want to repeat what was said while I was out, but I'm assuming that the administrative side of the cuts that need to happen has already taken place, or some recommendations will be coming forth, and maybe they were tossed out there in the discussion, and so I will leave it at that. But I'm assuming that where the most money that is possible would not be through art supplies and those kinds of things. So I'll just leave it with that. And however, I would second Callie Hastings' take on Brookfield Schools, since my daughter is part of that legacy. It's almost unthinkable to think about repurposing that school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Emily, huh? Emily, are you still there? Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead. Sarah Richards.
Hi, Sarah Richards. I teach first and second grade at Braintree School. I taught 10 years at Brookfield School previously, and on my 10th year at Braintree School. I went to Braintree myself back when there was a lower branch school and an upper branch school. And there is something about teaching in a small school that is like no other. The staff are like a family, the whole school is like a family. We know all the children know us. And my daughter even goes to Braintree School. And to even think about not being together is soul crunching. And I could not imagine being anywhere else than Braintree School. I just needed to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Emily, did you reconnect?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
So actually, Emily's my wife. We're here together. My name's James Huff. We're both residents of Braintree. And we have children that go to Braintree Elementary. Just a little backstory. Emily grew up in Braintree and went to Braintree Elementary, and myself, I went to Brookfield. So hearing some of these potential changes are directly tied to, you know, not just the entire community, but kind of on a personal level. So first of all, I just want to say, you know, thank you to all the educators that are on here tonight. You know, your job is one of a kind, and it you know, we're very grateful for that. But one thing I'd really like to, you know, mention is I'd like to see a plan for how you're going to communicate these changes and cuts to all the children of the district. So how do you suppose a child will respond when telling them that the district or the administration is no longer willing to invest in their education? And I think that's something that we all need to ask ourselves before we make any rash decisions on closing schools and things of that nature. So that's all we'd like to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kayla will be our last comment of public comment.
Hi, my name is Kayla Manning French. I am part of the Bethel community, but work in the Randolph community. I just want to say thank you so much to our community for showing up tonight. I think it shows a lot of the power and the amazing part of the Randolph Brookfield Braintree community, that we will show up for our students when needed. I want to echo the importance of our front-facing staff. Our schools are not only places of education, they are places where students access their basic needs, the food, the medical care, and the warm places in the winter when they need it. The small things like school supplies have larger effects. These are where students get to access their creativity and get to find out who they are in our classrooms. And then also looking at like the after school bus, which I haven't heard a lot about yet. To lose that would be such an inequity for our students who need these programs most. A lot of students in our community have lives that make it hard for them to go home sometimes. And I think having the ability to stay after school, to be a part of sports, to be a part of clubs, to be a part of theater, it is so important that we keep these programs alive, and that happens by creating access. So thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment on this topic. It'll now come to the board for discussion and questions to Robin and Michael. I do want to take a minute and acknowledge the work that went into taking on the task that was put before them, which was to bring us something to help us understand transparently what it looked like to have to what a budget would look like that would be less than a 10.5% increase from the budget we're in now. So I feel the need, this is part of the discussion, and then any board member jump in here. Part of our job as board members is to communicate to the community, this is what we're doing with what you have invested, and we want you to invest this much. If you don't want to invest this much, and you only want to invest this much, this is what you are going to lose, potentially. We didn't ask Michael to come here tonight and say, what do you want to get rid of? Or what do you think is expendable? What do you think is less important than something else? I think it's important for people to have a tangible understanding that if you don't want to pay one or feel you can't, this is what you may be sacrificing if we can't. And we need to be able to communicate that to the community if we want to pass a budget. That's my beginning of a discussion. There's a giant period at the end. I'm not sure I'm opening up here.
I didn't hear anyone speak in public comment in favor of more cuts or in favor of really drastic cuts, in favor of any cuts at all. And yet I know there are people in our community who are in favor of cuts. And so as we move forward through this process, the more we can communicate to our community, the better. And also the more people who are in favor of not cutting things, the more vocal they are, the people they know in our community, with the voters in our community, the better off we are as a school community. And I think that extends then to our entire, because our schools are investing in our whole community. And I've read from reform. I know that there are people who don't have children in schools and don't feel like they can pay taxes at all for education. So there are people out there who want cuts, and they will vote against large budget increases. So there's a task for the board, but also for all of us who want to support education in our community.
I think either this thought was in my head or someone said it, that there is, because we had this huge conversation at our last board meeting and presentation about the feasibility study. And there's almost like this, does one have to do with the other? Because they're both so huge. And the fact of the matter is, it does for me. In thinking about some of the pictures of the facilities that we have, that a lot would need to be invested to make them safe and viable and long-lasting facilities, regardless of what age of child is going to be in there. It would take money. So Brookfield, for example, is not in great shape. So I have to, when that idea came up, something needs to happen. I don't know if that's the answer. I'm not saying I think it's the answer. Closing it. But it's nickling there.
I would have a really hard time in this budget season without a lot more thought and planning, consolidating or closing schools. I really have I can't imagine how I could get there, and that was, other than financially, good for our kids.
And I think it speaks volumes that the board was unwilling to hear anything beyond the board. And that, I think that says that anything beyond that, really, I think that says anything beyond that, it's unfathomable to us at this point. A little bit of context for the public. In terms of when Michael presented the initial rough budget to us last meeting, we felt it was important, given the property tax increases that we all just faced and the really that we at least see what a budget looked like. What was important here? What was prioritized? It didn't feel responsible to just say 10%, you got it. Right. So I hope that as you were hearing all this tonight, you understand that we as a board, we're looking at it in terms of, hey, we want more information. We want to see where the public is at. And it strikes me that the public made its voice loud and clear tonight.
I feel like I'm still waiting, and I'm glad we're not being asked to give you a decision on where we want to go, because I am waiting to hear the rest of the information that we need to really see the impact of the budget, whether it's we go with a level service at a 10%. What does that really mean in Braintree, Brookfield, Randolph, in terms of the tax rate and in terms of sort of the average household tax burden? It's hard for me to kind of get a sense of whether or not, level 3, level 2, level 1, because it doesn't really mean anything yet. And I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but the formula is so, it's not really clear until we get all that information from the state to really get a sense of exactly what that means overall.
And I think I can tell you that Robin and I played with some different scenarios. And with the caveat for everybody who's still here and still listening, we don't have that data from the state. But I think we looked at a worst case scenario of going with the 10.5% increase, having our long-term weighted average daily membership be where it is right this second, so 200 students less than what it was last year. Remember, those are weighted students, so not only 200 real students. And we had a scenario where, sitting here right now, I'll tell you the number that we came up with, and I'll tell you the number that I want to say. Okay? So the number that we came up with was that could be a 50-cent increase per 100. Right? So your tax rate could go up by 50 cents. And I want to tell you 75 just so I have a cushion. Right? But I'll tell you that we played through some numbers and that's what it looked like. And the reason that I'm talking right now and not Robin is because when Robin talks, you get numbers that are way more close. You get the politics side of it from me, sort of understanding with the yields that are from the tax commissioner coming out and whatnot. I don't think those were super favorable to us. I know our long-term weighted average daily membership's not super favorable to us. And, so I do think that part of what could happen in this tax cycle is that there could be another round of big increases. And I'm also telling you that we looked at scenarios where we got to 0 and you still saw an increase in the tax rate.
And it's not just our budget that impacts our taxes because it's a statewide thing. So a lot of schools statewide, their community votes for a bigger budget, we participate.
Rachel's 100% right there. 100%.
Hey, Emil, I'm wondering, you went to the meeting where you talked with a lot of very school board members about the pain that was inflicted when they when they struggle to pass their budget. I wonder if you can kind of convey what that was like for them and what we're hoping to avoid with that work.
So I may get the dates a little bit wrong because I didn't follow it that closely when it happened, but I think they were into October, end of September, early October before they had a budget passed, and they voted at least 3 times, if not 4. And they saw a significant reduction in their budget. And what the board really talked about, right, were elected people that live in town that utilize or have utilized the school district, value education, right? We all chose to run because we value education. We understand the importance of public education, we understand the importance of schools in our community. And so they were sort of echoing that, and then also talking about how so much of their school budget was really either fixed cost or things like influences from the state, the tax yield rate, things that are really out of their control. So when they started having to talk about trying to go through all of these iterations of their budget, it was really uncomfortable really quickly because there's such a small part of the budget that you actually have control over. One of the biggest things I think about this year is 11.9% increase for health insurance for the employees of our district. That's the case if you own a small business, if you have health insurance and you pay for it out of pocket, you are probably facing a similar increase. That's a non-tax driven expense that we all face. That's such a huge impact on our school district. So I think when we started this conversation, we really wanted to understand, because we all read Front Porch Forum, we know that there are people who are not here tonight voicing their opinions about wanting to have a reduction in their property taxes or wanting to prevent further impacts to their property taxes. To really have these hard conversations that there is so much that we don't have control over, that when we start talking about peeling back a couple of $1 million, we're talking about losing preschool, right? That's what would be sacrificing as a community. So I think none of us want to, well, I guess I can't speak for us, but I'm pretty sure none of us want to get rid of preschool, right? But we also want to say to people that when we're having these conversations, we're kind of stuck. We have 11.9% increase in healthcare, and we have to give up preschool. Like, that doesn't feel good. And it's not what's best educationally. You know, an occupational therapist can talk to you about the lifelong benefits of it. That's kind of where this started. And this is what got me thinking about it. So I sat with them at a couple of different sessions at our state meeting, and they had kind of just passed their budget a few weeks before, and were still feeling the pain of it in the end of October for a process that started for them last December.
So we're in a situation where we effectively have to guess what our community will support. And I don't want to go under at all. I don't want to lose anything.
And I have to say, last meeting, when Mike presented us with this 10% increase, we were working under the assumption, we at the end of it, we had the assumption, and I led this conversation saying, I'm not sure if our community has the stomach for a 10% increase right now. That could be very wrong. And I could have been very wrong about that.
I mean, I think we can be assured that they can't stomach consolidating schools.
Right. So, when we have to remember too, there were some impassioned speeches today. Remember that this conversation and this entire exercise, this entire these 10 budgets you drafted up were really prompted by this assumption of goodness. Our community just experienced a 13.8% property tax increase. We know that Randolph and Brookfield Elementary, or Randolph High School and Brookfield Elementary schools, the facilities themselves are in rough shape, and they will need some expensive, work at some point. Look forward to those conversations, by the way. And with those two things in mind, this high property tax increase and these potential expenditures down the line, we said, well, does the community have the stomach for a 10% increase right now? And that is really what prompted this whole thing. Show us what it looks like if it's not a 10% increase. And it strikes me that our community has always, as far as I can remember, valued education in an incredibly generous way. So I wanted to acknowledge that and acknowledge that the presumption that, geez, do they even have, is this the right time for a 10% increase in the budget? That assumption of, I'm not sure, could have been very wrong. So thank you for all your work on this, because it really was based on a single comment of, does our community want this right now? And then we all agreed that it was worth investigating.
I don't think it was that single comment. I think it's a prevailing
Thank you.
sentiment.
Okay, good. I'm glad it wasn't the humbug in the room.
I do have a question, like a lot of the folks brought up in the public comment, a focus on like, instead of looking at services and supplies, like that go directly to kids, looking at administration. And I think it's something that the board should consider.
Sure.
That if we decide that we need to make cuts, it seems like there may be, there may be places that these are very specific cuts. And I know you said that you could make decisions, in different ways. But I guess I just wonder, as a board, can't we help make some decisions about where those things would be?
So I would say this, your job as a board is to make sure that the schools are well run. Your job is not to build the budget. That said, certainly put information in front of you. We tell you that every single position that was talked about in here is in those reductions. We could have gotten to a level where those positions would be. But I'll give you, for instance, I heard the assistant superintendent come up multiple times. One of the things that the assistant superintendent does is manages grants, right? I will guarantee, I didn't look this number up before I came here, but I will guarantee that that position brings in more than 4 times what they make. So when you cut that position, you lose that funding stream. Or you have to figure out a different way to make that funding stream go. A lot of that funding stream is federal grants, which is really particular. They happen to come to you from a district that before I got there, they didn't manage their federal grants very well. They got a bill for $385,000 in the first 6 weeks that I was there. Thank you. That didn't happen there. I appreciate that, right?
And it didn't happen after that on your watch there, right?
And it did not happen again after on my watch. That's true. But so when we look at what we're talking about, I appreciate when I walk into this meeting knowing that everybody who has a suggestion, everybody who puts something out there believes that this would be where we need to be. I can assure you that those are on my cuts. That we could have gotten there. If the board said get to 0, we would have seen a 20% reduction over this year in the administrative line. You would not have seen anything even half of that in any of the other lines. The way that you get the summary of the budget, nobody else would have been half of 20%. The administrative line would have gone to 20%. We'll also point out that the first thing that we cut was $50,000 out of administrative. Right? And so, and I think that's a piece that's there. I understand that. I understand where people are, and I think probably I've got some work to do, right? Because it can't be, we have to be in a spot where we understand what's going on. We have to be transparent. That's what I appreciate about what you did. And I also appreciate that you didn't necessarily put that stress out there that said, what are the pieces that are coming? I'm pretty sure you weren't going to go a whole lot further than 4, okay, in those conversations. But the other piece of that I know, and I think as a community, the people who spoke so eloquently tonight, passionately, what they have to understand, and I think what the board members here are starting to say, is we appreciate that you're out here today on early March, Tuesday. People are going to have to be out supporting a budget. And that's where it's really going to matter. I make no mistake, of all of the cabinet members that were sitting in the conference room, I think we spent 4 hours the first day, 3 hours the second of looking at that. And that was after saying to people, you need to come to this meeting with $2.5 million worth of cuts, and we're not leaving the room until we've got it. Right? The reality here is every single one of them would have said, let's go with the 10.5. Right? They would have said that. That would have been their preference. Emotion. Really. You know, so, and I see it here, you know, not only in the audience, but right here on the board. I see what you're looking at and what you're thinking about, and realizing, hey, here's what this is. This is what this looks like in Vermont. Vermont has 2 crises happening right now. One, Nick, we heard about actually from people who spoke in the audience. One is the cost. And I think we're starting to talk like maybe the community support more than what we thought they would support a month ago. You know, if they understand what it is they'll lose, they'll support it. Second piece that Vermont overall is going to have to come to grips with at some point is you heard folks talk about staffing. And you heard about how substitutes, I think somebody said the increase of, like 25%. And it's not changing a lot. We didn't suddenly get a flood of new substitute teachers. We've got like close to 20 people on provisional licenses of our professional staff. So Vermont has a teacher shortage right now, has an educator shortage, and that's actually the piece that I'm really worried about. So they're just kind of under the surface for us to think about. And I think our politicians, I think I started the conversation. I've never seen our politicians in the state be as active as early. And we're not even close to town meeting day yet. So I kind of have an idea of where the board doesn't want to go, sort of. If you, I assume maybe you want me to do work between now and the next time we come, but I don't have a direction yet as to what I should be thinking about.
So, I mean, as a board member, my thought process surrounding this kind of thing is, the first question I ask is, will the public support a 10% increase in the budget, right? After tonight, I'm, more confident they would. But then as a board member, I think my role too is to attempt to influence you in some ways. And I can let you know that I heard tonight that student-facing roles are key. Pre-K is beloved. And paras need to be deprioritized from any kind of cut conversations. Those are some huge, the 3 big takeaways. There are many more here. So as a newer board member too, I think, I need some direction here as in terms of what we to bounce back to here. But just from what I've heard tonight, those are my three big takeaways. All preceded by, are any cuts really even necessary? Or is the 10% budget good? So I don't know, what are the next steps?
I mean, tax numbers. I don't know the words to use, but it seems like there is a little bit of low hanging fruit in positions that are vacant. That we can, instead of calling them vacant, call them closed. I know that's not a lot. It's kind of piecemealing it together. But that's me trying to prioritize things, and that's not,
No, I hear you. I'm during this whole conversation too, I had questions about how these things were prioritized.
I don't think that we're gonna get a true temperature on what the community will vote for. And forgive me for this, but in the grand show, I'm so excited about all of the, or no, I thought it said technology was cutting off. From just this group. I think we have more work to do beyond reading Front Porch Forum and listening to these public comments, which are both valid, but taking that temperature here is not gonna get us that answer. So we need to do what is part of our job, which is to go out and take the temperature and talk to the people who we fear or think or assume might not pass a budget that is increased that much, but only increased in cost, not in service. I think there are very clear messages we need to get out, even ahead of having the tax rate, which was the whole purpose of this here. But I don't think we can say things like, I don't think I can walk away from this thinking, you know what? I do think that a 10.5 increase in what we're asking to pass might pass based on this. Sure. If we were the only people voting, if I ruled the world, this would be way easier. But unfortunately, I don't think anything's clearer after this marathon conversation, except more questions, which is useful, which is productive, right? Because one of those questions is, what can we do if we don't want to lose anything? What's that going to take? Is it possible? If we truly cannot stomach voting and approving a budget to put in front of the community members with any of this on it, we better get out there and talk to the community members that we think might not pass it. Last year, when we talked about the budget, Wayne said we need to keep our budget under, in this perfect window. Because if we went too high with our budget percent increase, there was a penalty, state legal penalty.
Sure.
And I think, wasn't that over 9%? So does that mean if we're at 10.5%, that we're gonna hit a penalty? State is 3% now, state as far as funding goes.
Or did they take that away? Did they take that away?
Well, I guess depending. So part of the calculation that was to less spending. Our total spending right now, I think that the estimate they're giving us is $15,183 per student. If we double it up and get double tax for everything over 15,000. It's not as it's a, it can be a percent of the budget, but you want to stay within the range of 30%.
Where are we? It's nothing. Do we have to wait until the state gives us our lowest student count, whatever it's called?
Definitely made our long-term average daily membership.
And that's where we've got the 200 different than the number less than what we think it should be. So we would definitely be over.
It sounds to me like whenever that information becomes possible, we need an immediate special meeting, a very quickly organized special meeting. Because I don't know that we can definitively move in on a path until we have more information.
Yeah, I mean, that's the information I'm waiting on. But again, sometimes if you don't get it, or you might be in dispute for a while. So it may take us a little while to get that number.
So my question would be, is you're sitting here and you're thinking about that number. Are you picturing a number in your head that would say, oh no, definitely the taxpayers aren't going to support that? For instance, 50 cents. If all the numbers come together and we look at 50 cents would be 500 on a $100,000 house. So it would be 1,500 on a $300,000 house.
So an education tax of 1,500
would increase.
Oh, on top of what they already.
Correct.
Okay. Addition to.
Yes.
It seems that while we're waiting for that information, we're both taking the temperature of the kids, but also communicating as we do that about what exactly would happen to these cuts. And like, including the information that we got from public comment tonight about how those cuts will impact students and families.
Yeah, that makes me a little more willing to maybe say, give you the direction of some low hanging fruit. That's not $4,400 of Braintree supplies. Or $9,000 of the Brookfield farm to school. I mean, that seems, but the bus driver that hasn't been hired yet, the facilities person that hasn't been hired yet.
But I think that's micromanaging.
Yeah, I know, but no, have him take a look to see.
I think we can give general guidance in terms of what our priorities are, but I don't think we can say, okay, drivers we can do without, but a librarian we can't. I
Right, that's not for us to decide.
Right.
So
That's why
we
we hired.
cannot because it's not
Yeah.
our.
It's what you hired me for, and then I hired the rest of the administrative team. And the administrative team, this is not, I think I've said it, but in case it hasn't really come out, I did not prioritize this list. That cabinet prioritized the list.
So is what I sort of hear being mulled around is just thinking about, I think Michael used the word attrition, reductions through some of the natural attrition that's already happened. So not necessarily, is that what I hear you saying, Anne? Is that like?
No, yeah, but what he's saying is that's too micromanaging, right? You don't want to hear that direct of a.
I think we said that.
Yeah.
No, I don't, I think you're okay to say that. I think what you're okay to say is, as positions become vacant, you want us to think really long and hard about, do we need to fill that position?
As opposed to saying, I think we need the facilities guy, but not the bus driver, right? That's kind of getting down to, sorry, as a new board member, still trying to figure this out, but
that's kind of the micromanaging level versus sort of the overarching, what attrition's already happened that we're managing without currently? And does that feel comfortable for next year? And what are those considerations look like?
Look, I think what you just did was you went down through level 4.
4%.
If you looked at that and you said, okay, we're not gonna cut it by more than 4%. And in fact, as a board, here's what we want to take off that priority list. You're not gonna get much argument from administrators. I'm not gonna sit here and say, you know, even though we prioritized it this way.
Let's have it all.
I think that there's the flexibility. Exactly right. So I would love to have all of that. That's why I present you a level service budget to start with. Right? And if you tell me I can't have it all, and you want to take less than 4%, I put the list that got you to 4%. If you're in that list, it's in the 4% priority for the admin team. Do I think that's exactly like, do I think what we're doing right now is the textbook definition of what policy governance is? Probably not. Right?
But it does sound like there's a scenario, a hypothetical scenario where we could say, hey, we really like this level, except for these elements. Could you consider doing these changes?
I think you just said to me, so remember I started out with this, that I was trying to do it in 1% increments. If you're giving me something less to hit, then I might move some of that around on my own. Right?
Thank you.
You know, so I think until we hit that spot where I stopped and said the board might want to reconsider something. There's some things ever so complete that it's definitely got to be this.
No,
it's definitely got to be that.
But that's for you to decide.
Right. I could foresee a scenario where I say, hey, I really, you know, whatever we do, like, we know that we have an excess driver. We know that we have a facilities position that we're just not filling. Whatever we do, let's throw those to the top. You know, that's something I could foresee myself suggesting. And then you hear that and you go and do your job, and that's that.
So we are going to ask for at least a 6% increase, more likely a 7% increase.
Right, because once we heard 4, we
On our
said,
budget.
no.
And
4 to 9%.
I mean, if the taxpayers will support it, we'll ask for the 10.5%. We'll ask for it all. But if we don't get the sense that that's going to be supported, then we kind of have to take a guess at what we think people will tolerate.
And if we fail, then we'll be like Barry, and then we won't get elected.
Well, there you go. But also we need to take into, like, we need to not be in financial peril.
Is it okay if I say something about failed budgets?
You think so?
So I think you all know that Albert is where I spent, one of the districts I spent the last 6 years in. I love the people about that. The 6 years I was there, they passed the budget on the first time once out of 6. Almost every other time they passed on the second time. Once it went to 3. Never did it go to variance levels, right? So I do think that they're. I'm not sure that you want to compare the situation that we're in with what was going on with Barry. I suspect that if you talk to the folks in there, you dig down underneath that, it wasn't just about dollars and cents. I think there was some other things probably going on. That the transparent way that you're approaching this will help correct.
Yeah, and it's also a community that's been ravaged by flood 2 years in a row.
Yes.
So they're really, their town budget, so when they're thinking about taxes and school, but they're in a situation also that we're not in. Very fortunate.
And it's comforting to hear that in the event that, you know, we present a budget to the public and they don't pass it. It's not the end of the world. It's not even, doesn't even sound that dire, really. You know, we come back and say, okay, well, let's try a 9%
Oh, it will not feel good to a district that's not used to failing a budget.
No,
So
I'd be happy.
let me be careful there. For the educators who are still in the room, the fact that the budget fails is gonna feel icky. In Albert, because it happens every year, it doesn't feel icky. It doesn't feel icky until it fails the second time.
I think also, like, the very situation might be unique, but last year there was a record number of budgets that did that. So it's
Right.
not just Barry, it's not just Barry's unique situation. But I think where I would draw the line is the per pupil spending. Like, if we are going to get penalized because our per pupil spending is too high, that's where I would draw our line.
Okay, that's fair.
Yes, going back to just like a little bit of timeline here. We're gonna be issued a number from the state, right? And we're already disputing a 200 number difference. How long will that 200 dispute go back and forth?
Will it go back to, it'll be resolved here. Can I say January 1st?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're already in the back and forth part of it.
Yes.
So, all right.
So if I could make I'm not making a motion yet, but I want to throw something out on the table just to, someone to fix. Because it's getting late. So what Michael and his team can take away from tonight is that we feel we need more, everybody feels they need more information, but we need more information from the state to understand what we can do. Right. We have work to do ourselves in the community. We need to talk about how that's going to happen because we are one voice. So while we can go out individually, we need to agree on the messaging that we're doing. I think we need to be really careful about, you don't pass this, you lose free, and I also would venture to say that the group does not want to see a budget that includes a reduction in classroom staff.
Yes.
Or we would like to see a budget that doesn't include the elimination, of student facing
Student facing roles are key.
staff. There are degrees of that though. Yes. That's as much as I feel comfortable saying right now. But I feel like we can't leave this discussion without giving some sort of something more than we're waiting for the state.
Even saying, can we ensure that, the budget that you proposed was the 10%, 10.5, ensure that we don't get penalized for that per pupil spending?
No.
Okay. You just need to hear more from the state.
I need to know what the equalized difference.
Okay.
Long-term weighted average daily membership number.
Got it.
At 15,188, it is over, right? We're being penalized.
I don't know.
They don't know.
that There's a.
Thrown out a couple numbers, 15.8 and 16.1.
So the legislature right now, as they're getting ready to go back, I think that there is talk about an allowable growth threshold. There's an adequate funding formula that's potentially being talked about. There's all kinds of things. So we don't even know what the rules are exactly right now. Here's what I think I know. And call it, I'm looking at a crystal ball at the moment, right? Say that I've done this for long enough that I'm pretty confident that at least some of the towns, what the sense that I have is some version of reductions that include some of the things to 3%. So the 3% reduction, 7% increase is sort of where the board is leaning right at the moment. My guess is some of our towns will see a 20-cent increase on their tax rate, if that's what you do. If that's where you stand, I think they'll see a 20-cent increase. First of all.
And when do we need to vote on this budget?
In mid-late January.
Okay.
Can I just, do we know, Robin, do you have, how much did our budget increase last
You're trying to get that sweet spot because of
Yeah.
because of the faulty law.
Right, right.
Oh.
And this, well, and the first budget that Michael gave us was a level service, which would have been what we paid for last year. So I'm just curious.
8.5%.
It was an 8.5%, and the community supported it.
A lot of communities did.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And
No, I
do
don't
we
think it was
have
a
the
particular
numbers on it? Because I think the numbers are.
The numbers were better than that, but remember last year was the first year that the state rolled out the new
Yeah.
long-term weighted average daily membership where you picked up a boatload of students. And if you hadn't picked up a boatload of students, your tax rates would have gone through the roof. That's why some of my towns voted taxes down, because they didn't have anything near an 8.5% expenditure increase, and they received 20-30 cents on their tax rate.
So explain to me why this next, if, except that they're saying now we somehow have lost 200 students.
So even if it stayed the same.
So if
you
it
don't-
stayed the same, explain to me
Why it doesn't work.
why it would be a level service budget would be so much higher.
Because what you're looking at is you're going to take your expenditure budget and you're going to divide it by, I'm super oversimplifying this, you're going to divide it by your long-term weighted average daily membership. So we actually need to go back to how you did that for the FY20, that was the FY24. So you asked how much did it increase when you went to FY25? What you got to say is when you were over here in FY23, your long-term weighted average daily membership was a small number. It got a lot bigger here. So when we take a number and divide it by a bigger number, we get a smaller number. Right? So because the long-term weighted average daily membership went up so much, your cost per pupil went down, even though your expenditure went up. And now, when you come to this next year, you're not going to see another big gain in long-term weighted average daily membership. Let's even pretend it's exactly the same. So now when you take the same denominator and divide it by a much bigger numerator, you get a much larger cost per equalized pupil. So that 1 year, last year was your sweet spot, right? And so last year, you were able to put money into the budget and have it not have a huge impact on your tax rates because of that.
All right.
Great question.
Okay. So just in terms of action items here, we know that we're going to get more information and by, remind me of the date for the state.
Or your next meeting, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
I sort of look at the time frame of this. So next week, and then we're into the holiday break.
Yeah.
Right? So we're 1 week away from the holiday break starting. Don't imagine that you want to have a special meeting on Christmas Eve. That'd be fun. Just kidding. And so we're gonna be pretty close to January. when things settle out a little bit anyway.
Okay.
You know, in order for me to do work with the administrative team, I've got next week.
Mhm.
And then we'll get back and we'll figure out. If I have an idea about what you're looking for, we're gonna do some work. Like, I would say right now, if I were trying to read the temperature of the board, I think you're basically saying to me, Michael, you're right. Consolidation, repurposing, that's a big deal. And we want more time than we're gonna get to do that. So we appreciate that you brought it up and that you could bring out a significant savings that could have less of a negative impact on students, but that's a pretty big impact on communities. That equation doesn't work for us. I would have not been doing my job if I didn't put it there. I can understand if you say, this is a conversation that we need to have over a longer time period. And in fact, we're opening the door to that conversation right now so that people know that that was something that was serious. That's what I'm reading the board on that. I'm also reading the board on, hey, we're not going to come back to you next month and say, you know, that 10.5% we were talking about, let's go deep. Let's keep jumping down there. You're sort of landing as a board on, we're going to be somewhere around a 3 or a 4% from the 10%. So you could be putting together a 6 or 7% increase going out to taxpayers. I'm predicting for you right now that some of the towns will see a 20-cent increase on their tax rate if we do that. So the question is, am I hearing you with the information that I'm giving you, that I'm betting that it's be a 20% or 20 cents for some of your towns, maybe more.
I'm not comfortable saying that.
Okay.
And
What do you mean?
I don't know. It's definitely not reflecting what I'm feeling.
What you just said.
Right. Yeah.
So Ryan, and what's got to happen here, and I don't want to put you on the spot,
Sure.
but the board as a whole has to, I can understand, and I could be sitting here, you could imagine that I might be sitting here and saying, is Ryan saying that a 7% increase is too low or too
No,
high?
I mean, what I heard from our community tonight, and remember, last meeting I was sitting here saying, geez, Louise, I don't know if our community will stomach a 10.5% increase.
Yep.
What I heard from our community tonight was, they deeply value things that are in, things I'm seeing in the level 1, level 2, and level 3.
Yep.
And I'm not, so I don't think it's safe to say like the temperature of the board right now is hovering around a 7% cut, because
Gotcha.
I'm not sure.
That's a
if there's-
3% cut.
Right, or 3% cut. I'm not sure if there's anything that I've heard about here in the 1%, 2%, 3% that I could definitely say like, yep.
There, Ryan. So what you're saying is, Michael, you have enough information to make the decision for the budget that you're ready to move forward, knowing that it may result in a 20-cent increase for some towns.
I still really want to see a budget that doesn't incur a penalty. I know that much. And it sounds like we don't know if it will or not right now.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm definitely not comfortable voting that I know that I'm not sure it incurs the penalty.
If it incurs the penalty but has a 5-cent increase, do you care? It won't. So hypothetically, that's not.
I don't know.
That's
I'm not
relevant.
sure. I'm not comfortable in that.
Okay, there. So then what I'm hearing from Ryan, thank you, Ryan, for the dialogue here, because I think what you're doing is I think you're helping people to build off of something. What I'm hearing from Ryan is, Michael, if you've got enough reductions for what we heard tonight that I can pick and choose a little bit from in some way, shape, or form, or you'll pick and choose based on parameters that I set, like maybe one of your parameters is you don't touch student-facing jobs. I don't know that I don't really think about that, but the reality here is if you're saying we can get there with what you've talked about, as long as we don't incur a penalty, maybe.
Right. I mean, what what I heard from the public tonight was student-facing roles are key. Pre-K is off the table in terms of touching, and paras, need to be really need to be deprioritized or off the table altogether. With those three things in mind, a budget that does not incur a penalty, I would be comfortable saying, yeah, I think the public's probably going to go for this. That's what Ryan Anderson thinks. And I don't want to speak for the board, but I was working under the assumption that the public was really tired of seeing any kind of increase after that 13.8% property tax increase. And hold on, and I wanted to be able to present them with something that said like, hey, look, we're being really careful here. And I think that was conveyed. We are, and we are looking at a lot of different parameters. But I also heard from my community that, and I know from history that we are an incredibly generous community, that an incredibly generous tax base that says that really values education. So I mean, I would hazard a guess that my initial assessment of the climate was wrong, and that they probably would pass a 10.5% level budget. But on a personal level, I really don't like the idea of incurring a penalty because our cost per student is so high.
Can I just point out that tier 1 and tier 2, if I took my notes correctly, do not contain any student facing positions or paras?
I think I need more information about how special ed is right sized. Because that's.
Is what?
I wrote down for level 1, that's the special education. Evaluations, thank you.
And it hasn't been touched in a few years.
Thank you. No, you're spot on.
So I think that we've given Michael some idea of what we're looking for.
May I tell you what I think that is?
Sure.
I think that you're saying to me, Michael, you've done a lot of hard work. We have enough information right now. You don't need to bring us new things around our expenditure budget. We need new things around state numbers.
That's where I.
Yes.
Can do that.
And our next meeting is early enough in January. It's the 8th. Well, this is the first thing on your list. And the students will just have returned, right? And staff.
Might want to reserve the 15th as a potential
Special meeting. We will have a special meeting, people. I'm not telling you when it will be, but there's no way we're only seeing each other once a month until March. We do need to move on because we have other things to do.
Yeah.
All right.
We're done with financial things.
We're here.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we got an RTCC budget. Sorry.
Yes.
You thought you were done with budget.
We're not.
You're not.
We're not.
We are.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming. And you're invited to stay. We're not done. Everyone.
Okay, so last time we were together, we talked about the RTCC budget. It was a small expenditure budget increase, but it was causing the tuition to increase in a much higher way. So one of the things we talked a little bit about at that meeting, as I recall, was what would it take to be at a level tuition rate? So Nico went back and looked and said, okay, when we look at that, she would take in that budget. Remember I told you at the high school, they took the half a nurse out. She put the half a nurse into her budget, but took it back out there. So she added a full-time last budget. She added half-time to get to full-time. And now she's taking it back out, that half-time. a math instructor, and the health careers teacher. I'll tell you why the school quality standards around nursing say that we would have one nurse, one registered nurse for every 500 students. But the last meeting that the technical center reported 97 students. So having a half-time nurse is still significantly above what the school quality standards call for. The math instruction leaves us with one full-time math instructor. Right now we have two, so taking one out leaves us with one for 100 students. And the health and careers class is a class that is interpolated dramatically at the moment and does not have a teacher. So pausing that for a year makes sense to her. Well, that's the one where you would really spend the time and energy trying to say, hey, how do we get this program back up and going? Here's the good news. She hasn't talked to the RAB about this, and she hasn't talked to the state about this. She and I are going to talk to the state tomorrow about this possibility. So you don't have to make any decisions about this. But next time, those are the reductions that would get us to a level tuition. In other words, your tuition, the reason that your tuition was going up without making these cuts is because the enrollment makes that equalized pupil thing again, is down. Okay? So I think that's all you need for that budget tonight. You just have to decide, do you want to go with the budget that you had before, or do you want to go with something that gets you more towards level tuition? I know tonight's not the night to hammer on that.
I recall that we did not, I don't remember having a problem with the budget last meeting. So,
I think we talked about trying to have a little bit of a soft landing. Do we anticipate that? I have to go back and look at my notes, but that's what I recall about the RTCC budget, was trying to float down instead of crash down in a couple of years.
that's right. Thank you for that.
This is the flow.
It was a great analogy.
It was perfect. It was awesome.
And it sounds, I mean, we won't be voting on this tonight. I don't.
I mean, keep flowing.
We're gonna move forward from having a conversation with the RAB and with the state.
Yeah.
Okay,
When is your next RAB meeting though?
she's gonna end up having a special.
That's
RAB.
fine. Okay.
She doesn't know it yet, but that's not.
Yeah, okay. No problem. Because then we would look for a recommendation from the RAB. Yeah. It's down in the consent agenda. Oh, it's in
And
there.
they don't need anything to do.
Okay, are we good to move on from budgets?
I'm gonna sit here quietly. For a minute.
So the ends committee, a first read of, what we've come up with in our ends committee. Emil, do you want to talk about it at all? Do we just want to go into a, what do you think kind of conversation?
I'll be really brief. We have worked pretty hard to get to something that looks very simple. We took into consideration the portrait of the graduate, some state language, and what do you think? It is the page immediately after our agenda. If you've been, cognitively bogged down thinking about that.
And of course, the end statements, those are our outcomes. That is what we are saying. This is what our outcomes, what we want our outcomes to.
And they will then be interpreted by the administration and they will
And measure.
then figure out how they're going to measure it and present that to us.
We did get some feedback from administration that they felt like they could come up with measurable things for all of this, which is something we did spend a few meetings ago talking about, making sure that what we put in here was something that could be measured. And they feel confident that they can do that.
I think the big thing, well, one of the big things, I'm actually going to read that first end statement just because that would kind of be us, our a picture of the board, and that would be the tagline. Orange Southwest School District will use the resources invested by the community to create inclusive, academically rigorous schools that maximize each individual's potential. You have no idea how long it took to come up with that sentence. Thank you, Rachel Fish. What's that?
Building on the work that you all had already been doing.
I think we'd still be
project, yes.
first sentence without you, so thank you.
This is a first read, so if people, this is an opportunity to go back and thank you, Robin, specifically. Thank you to everyone for coming, but thank you, Robin, for coming for numbers. So, there's a chance next meeting that'll be our second read, or did we think we did a few meetings before having a second read? Didn't we say that in the beginning?
Did, you said you wanted to
Yeah.
stay focused on budget for
Right.
the next couple meetings because you don't want. Because you can start on the rest of the agenda about.
At almost 9:00. Yeah. So first read, take it, ponder, and take a few months to do so. Second read. Yeah, I feel like we talked in our committee about particular language. Somebody said we should use the word vocation. Anybody else remember that?
Sorry, what I didn't.
Vocational. She thought there was discussion about.
That there's
using a
more
different
modern
word.
language to describe occupational skills or something. But nobody has a problem.
Like career preparedness or instead of.
Sorry to throw that out there now. I know.
Like career preparedness instead of vocational skills.
Occupational skills.
Yeah. Career planning is what.
I would like the second I had it was a surprise me. I was not aware that was a word that I should use. I think it aligns with language that's still used, like vocational rehab. Like it's still language that could discuss work when you talk about occupation. Okay. It can open the door to mean things like stuff you do every day in ADLs, like functional life skills. But that's my healthcare worker lens on.
Okay, moving on then. Great. So first read, we're moving on. My agenda. Here we are. Ownership linkage.
Yes, we have drafted a letter to the community explaining what we've been up to as a board for the last 3 months, with language surrounding what they can expect to come, surrounding conversations about facilities. And we have a draft of it and we're just finalizing it, and we'll have it finalized, what do you think, this week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, open meeting law, can we can email that around?
I think you can send it out. If there can't be any discussion.
Can't be any discussion.
Can't be any feedback.
Okay.
Okay.
Or even you kind of talking about it, right? Right, just send it as informational.
Okay.
I would, we do want to think about timing in terms
Yeah,
of when
well,
it
that's
comes out,
why,
because it'll,
that's why we want to get it to you guys sooner, so that we can have an open conversation about it.
in the next meeting. So the plan will be, you send that out to the board, we receive and read on our own. It'll be included in the packet as a draft, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk more about it in the next meeting.
That's right.
Okay. Great. Negotiations?
We've met both as the support staff committee of the professional staff committee have both met. We have an email to Pietro at the moment. We talked with the association. Sounds like the association is open to Monday nights. We're trying to make sure that Pietro's availability is for Monday nights as well. So I think we're moving along. We've traded information back and forth. I'm looking at Tim because Tim has been doing a lot of work on the association side of this. So we've been trading the preliminary numbers so that we can agree that here's our baseline.
Great, thank you. And included in the packet also 2 letters that went out that you had charged Michael and I to work on. Thank you, Michael, for doing the work. And did you want to talk about, we just kind of got acknowledgement of receipt?
We got acknowledgement of receipt from both superintendents saying they'll share it with their for their next regular meeting.
So that line of communication has been open. Module 2, ownership. Now I'm just gonna put out there that we may want to, they're gonna be long meetings anyway. The big question that comes out of that module is, of course, do we all agree on who our owners are, right? That's the biggest thing, because if we can't agree on that, we need to do more work to agree on that. I remember this conversation from the last time we went through this training, so I'm going to bow out a little bit because I don't want to just recreate that conversation. Does anyone want to throw out who they think the owners are? Our owners. So the last conversation that we had about this, some of the things that were thrown out were the taxpayers, the students, the parents, the staff. And it may be that this conversation, because we're all getting a little fried, is the question, who are the owners? And we need to think about it, and that's fine. So I remember someone saying stakeholders, but then doing the training, I was like, well, this is interesting, because one is, you know, at every, what is it? Every owner is a stakeholder, but not every stakeholder is a
Yeah, I had that same thought. And so then I was like, well, people that we contract with for marketing or whatever, they may be stakeholders in the organization because they participate with us, but they're not part of our business. I mean, they may be in another capacity, they may be a taxpayer, they may be a parent, but.
I think that makes sense that there are, I think there are like some smaller groups that are not owners, but I think most of the people in our, like everybody in our community, I would say are the owners. And I think that raised questions for you when I was looking at the diagrams of like, you know, I know that like they said that people can be both owners and I can't say customers for.
Oh, beneficiaries.
But like, yeah. Whatever it was. I mean, all of it, I'm kind of like about the like corporate take.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's necessary. Like, I think it's just, I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna stop on the language. But, and make a sentence here. Which is that I think like our owners are, it's like the 2 sides of the 2 triangles where like it's the same people that we're serving and that are our owners because of the school system.
I'd say yes, except for students.
But you don't see them as owners?
No, I disagree with myself.
I definitely see them as owners.
Yeah. If they live in the community, yes.
They are, but not just by their staff. They're outside the community, they're not owners. They're stakeholders, but not owners.
What about community members who aren't parents, aren't staff, and aren't taxpayers?
Who like that?
Yeah, who doesn't pay taxes? Can it be that much?
And you can make a low enough income. that you-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're community members, like,
Oh, right, okay, so.
That's why, I mean,
our schools belong to our community.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Right, because then you can't just, right, when you say tax cards, then you get into the position of, are you then excluding people who have no income or who may be experiencing some incredible disadvantage, right? Like someone experiencing homelessness, does that person get excluded from that ownership because they are not a taxpayer? That's something I need to think about. And I'm not prepared to answer.
So I can say that, Vermont has a housing crisis. We have a fair number of unhoused families in our district. And I would still consider them owners. I'd say they're part of our community. Many of them work. Many of them have kids that are in our district. And when they talked about closing the hotel shelter program, we exited 500 children in our state from sheltered within a shelter.
Right. So if anything, the term taxpayer is too narrow.
So community member.
yeah, that's what I wrote down.
Yeah,
Identify as living in the community. Because again, I think staff members spread outside the community, live in other communities that are stakeholders, but not others.
Okay. Awesome. That's as much as I'm gonna let this conversation go, because we have an agreement there, which is fantastic.
Michael, I think you can't look at the hands all go through.
That would be fast. Within 18 seconds.
Or I can do the right.
Okay. The executive limitation 2.4 and 2.5, second reads. Asset protection and succession. Does anyone have anything to say before we vote?
Very straightforward.
And you gotta know I'm looking at you.
I
You guys
know,
realize
and I didn't do, well, I started to think about this one, but this is 2.4. But if you notice, there's a provision in this one that says, risk incurring those situations or conditions described as unacceptable in the board policy, financial condition and activities, and we haven't seen his interpretation of that one yet. So I was like, I kind of want to see how he interprets that one. Because this one is saying he's gonna. He's not going to.
Described as unacceptable in the board policy, but we can still accept this.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm
But they
curious
definitely
how-
overlap there.
Would you like the order of the review change?
Well, I'm wondering, and I'm wondering if we want to do that, although the reason why this one was here is because this is the time of the year that he's putting together a budget, and so we can be looking at, is he drawing on a 3-year planning process, and is he deviating from the ends? Really
I think this is
giving him our ends yet, so
right.
it's still sort of a very preliminary, so I'm okay with it as it is.
Okay. I mean, this is another example of this being kind of a wonky year.
Yeah.
So.
The order changed.
Order of the change.
No, because I think once we get the interpretation of 2.4, the other one, whatever it is, 2.3, I think it is.
Yes.
The financial conditions one, I think they'll probably all type together, I'm guessing. So, and we can always revisit it. Right. If we need to.
We can always request.
Yep.
So I will entertain a motion to accept both at the same time if you.
Second.
Well, I didn't move.
Oh.
That's all
I will move that we accept monitoring report 2.4, financial planning and budgeting, and 2.5, emergency superintendent succession.
Well, second that.
And Ryan seconds that. All those in favor, visibly audibly?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. All right, first read on 2.6.
So you have 2.6 on your table as you go in today. 2.6 was kind of a big one for a budget. Meeting. You know, when we were building the agenda, Hannah said, "Can you do that?" I said, "Sure, why not?" Then I looked at it. I said, "Oh, boy, what I get myself into." So, what's interesting about this one is I think it's the first time that when you get down to the compliance, so the last page, you'll notice that I did not sign this one. Because you'll notice in the notes, prior to being able to report compliance, some of this documentation needs to be collected and collated. Right, so I think what I'm saying, I think what I'm telling you is spent a lot of time on budget and getting things ready, and some other things came up in the last month. So I don't have all of this, I don't have all of the data that you necessarily would be looking for. But I identified what that data would be when you look through the observable conditions and what the evidence would look like. Right? So I think you can look at it and you can say, hey, if he comes next time with that information ready and can say that he's got it sitting in the binder, this works or it doesn't work or whatever. I just wanted to call your attention to that part of it. Up until now, I've been able to collect and code. Yeah, what?
No, I appreciate that. That's the responsible way to go about this.
You have a lot of it.
A little bit this month.
I actually have a question on, I'm sorry.
No, please.
The data protection and information security, and then you list sort of training for focus on the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, so FERPA, HIPAA, medical confidentiality.
Yep.
Is that the CR 42, sort of that higher level of security for mental health, substance use? Is that what you mean by the medical confidentiality? Because HIPAA is a component of medical confidentiality.
Yeah. So I know that what we've got to do, this is part of the data collation that I've got to do for you. For some of our folks, we have a higher level of training that they do.
Okay.
And I need to be able to say for sure that, yes, they've done that. Appreciate that you find the vagueness.
There was a change. We changed, and I don't know why you didn't have that update, but we changed a while back. The, instead of 15,000, I guess the state has gone to 40,000.
Surprised about that.
Yeah, it was changed. I don't know why the policy here is not reflecting it.
We voted
to change it, yeah, so.
So I think you voted maybe in the policy, but then you didn't vote to change it in your limitation, maybe?
No, no, because you do your monitoring report right from the policy and we changed it in the policy. So it just wasn't updated online, I guess, because it should read 40,000. Because
So we go back to this date or January last year, or January or February last year. And look at the.
yeah, it's
Are we still in
probably,
the same order? Or in the same-
No, we're not in the same order.
we're
going-
we're
going
a little
numerically.
bit funky.
Yeah.
I can look back because I'm
Thank you.
pretty sure I have. Yeah. But I know we changed it. And we did it, the board voted on it, and it just wasn't updated on the website.
Get it. Percent of that data, let's see these two.
Cool. All right. Thank you for your work. Limitless. To do the facilities monitoring report.
In your packet. So if there's anything that's a surprise there to you. I think I have one of the things that doing this prompted was, you have the section where I initial often the projects that say they've been completed have been completed. And that was something that Wes Bob and I talked about last Tuesday, saying, oh, wait, we've got this thing that Michael needs to do. So as soon as we get back from the holiday break, I'm spending a chunk of a day and going, seeing all of the things that I haven't signed off on yet.
Okay. Anyone specific questions? Great. Thank you. Let's see, second reads for policies we looked at, excuse me, last time for first reads. C10, C8, and B3. Anyone with concerns from our first read? Heather, anything you want to say for the second read?
No, I think it's pretty clear cut. The updates are from the Vermont School Board Association, and the only changes to the HHB and the employee harassment are to move the itemized names out of the policy into a procedure portion of the document, so that they can easily be updated if need be.
So B5 is also in here.
Oh. Oh, it's B5 on here?
Well, B5 is the employee harassment.
Right, but we didn't list it.
Oh, it's not listed correctly in the agenda. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that we'll have to move that one.
Yep.
And be warned appropriately. Thank you for catching that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, but we can vote on that's which, and B3. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'll entertain a motion.
Move that we accept policy C10, C8, and B3.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Emil. All those in favor, visibly audibly? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimous, right? Great. Self-evaluation. Conflict of interest. Anyone? Did people have a chance to go through this? Give it some thought? I think this is always an interesting one to me, because we are a small community, so it can feel like, Rachel, you're only here to talk about Braintree and only talk to Braintree people, and I think that can not
I know, I know.
do that, but I think in a small community, yeah, that can be really tricky, So we've had several instances in the recent past where people have recused themselves because of close relationships or prior knowledge, or, it happens. What we need to remember is the process by which we would lodge a complaint if we thought someone else did, or the process by which we would for ourselves. That's what I thinking about as I do this. Don't accept anything, people. Just don't accept anything.
Oh,
It's
man.
just,
Uh-oh.
I'm keeping mine. It's bad.
Gift from the students, right as we're talking about the budget. Oh, geez. Orders here and everything.
Other thoughts about this? Keeping ourselves in check on this one?
It's very explicit, so, I mean, and in my experience, I feel like we've done a good job of following it. I feel like again, we know each other pretty well, so we kind of know.
What's that?
You can't get away with too much here in our town.
Influence is there always, or can be. All right, then I'm gonna cut this one short too. Good, all right. It'll come around again next year. Let's see. Look at us just bopping along. I've again lost there. Okay, we're down to the consent agenda, people. Does anyone have any edits for the full board meeting or committee meeting minutes? I hate a word I used in the minutes I took, but it's not a big deal. Anyway. Good, we're all good, okay? Yep. Okay, the calendar amendment, do you want to talk about that at all? Yep. Moving that day.
Moving to March half day.
Anyone have concerns about that, questions, need to better understand the requests, anything like that?
Just it was to the 17th.
Correct, yep.
Which is the Friday before 3-day.
Yeah.
Right, MLK weekend. Which is also on Monday, so.
There we go.
Did the calendar that's in here, did it have the new thing? The new date?
I think it had.
There it is. So did he already put it in here? The
Yeah.
change? No, that's the. This is the.
Yeah.
So
So
what are we changing? We're changing.
the 26th is an early release of March.
Yep.
And what's being requested is it being changed to the 17th.
Did I say that? Which would be Monday. Okay.
No, that's a Friday.
Oh, to January.
Yeah.
Whoa, so we're going all the way up.
Yeah. Making that a 3.5.
Oh, a 3.5 day weekend. Okay, so it's going to.
Well, not really, I mean. It'll be professional development.
Okay.
Any concerns with that, anyone? Great, okay, and then the last would be the Reagan budget.
You're gonna approve a budget tonight.
Dun, dun, dun. Anything anyone wants to say about it? Questions, concerns, comments?
This is the most straightforward one last time. There was nothing that we talked about going back to getting more information. I think we're good.
You've seen it before? We liked it then? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve the whole enchilada.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as it was provided to the board.
Great, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Rachel Krish, seconds. All those in favor, audibly, visibly? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. All right. Oh, why did I put this in 2 sections? We already talked about the letter to other school districts. Superintendent's report. What couple things you wanted to?
In your packet,
Point out
I think that we're looking at that. one of the things that's really interesting, and Mika has stayed with us all the way to the end, so I am gonna make sure that we share that part here. As a school district with a technical center in it, there are certain things that you have a responsibility for. And I didn't know if people knew that or not. So I didn't know that. I'm sort of learning, and I thought that would be important for us to have here. And one of the things for us to be thinking about is, when do we do these things? What does it look like? Now we're in the budget piece and we'll take care of that, but then being more thoughtful later about what actually happens. So,
I really appreciate this, especially specifies that in consultation with the advisory board. So it's not just having representatives on the advisory board. It's a really purposeful collaboration with. So I know I've mentioned this before, I'll say it again. I do encourage, even if you are not a representative member of the advisory board, to attend those meetings. And I actually think we should consider putting a kind of, they're quarterly, right, Nika? Am I right about that? Yeah. Usually.
Yes, one every quarter. The next one is in February, and I believe it's the 12th, and I can confirm in just a second.
So I think that we might have a standing agenda item in that rhythm where the representatives from the advisory board can talk a little bit about what is going on there. I know that we get a report from you, Nika, as well, but I think it's important for the board member representatives, because we do have such a specific responsibility there.
And those are usually right before school meeting, aren't they?
Yeah. Correct.
And just so you know, so it is at 5 p.m. on February 12th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we have a special one, Nika.
Well, I'll be there too.
Thank you for waiting this entire time. Goodness gracious. Now, do people have questions about that? We get this before, right? So people have seen it and just,
Yeah, I mean, being on the lab, I did my own research here. Like, all right, what is this RAB thing and what does it mean and what am I supposed to be doing? So I looked at a bunch of the state rules. They're in my little binder now. So I know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Good. The calendar changes in there.
Axar, budget. I would say to you, the budget piece. Tim. The thing that I promised that I could put into the notes. That is almost all of it. It doesn't have level 4, but it has level 1, 2, and 3. So you think we're gonna pass it now?
Yep. And then this page can also be posted with our minutes.
Yep, I'll add to that page, so everybody can't read far. So you notice that the positions, when we were taking positions that people were in, it's highlighted in orange there. This is what we ran towards. A lot of orange. So the 4 was right here. So we made it through that. So I've got to put that on the back of that. And I will give you that as well. But then I'm just going to drop all of those into a shredder. I can make sure that you have both of what I promised I would get you in the minutes tonight.
Great.
Jim's still here, so Tim has a copy of it as well.
Great, okay, here's an incidental, action item recap. Where's I take notes? I mean, you've got work to do, people. Keep looking at the budget. Please talk to people, not just in your own communities, rent trade. Just go to Braintree. We don't ever go to Randolph. Sure, hang out. Something like that. not some jars.
In Brookfield, we only
But that's
see
not
each
just
other
Braintree,
voting day.
right? Well, what'd you say?
Brookfield, we only see each other on voting day.
You know. Well, ownership
You
linkage.
have to-
committee, Ownership linkage committee, I might, in a future meeting, you might think of ways, not specifically for this, maybe for this budget cycle, but bringing in ideas for the rest of us of how we might reach out to constituents. And I really do think we need to have a conversation around what that could look like as a policy governance board, because you do have to be careful, not keep information, but in how you represent the board as a whole, because we have one voice.
Even if we just have like listening sessions about so people, they're reporting back to the administration report.
I'm afraid we miss the people who vote no on those. Like,
Yeah, that's really weird.
kind of like tonight, we've got people who are of what support. Yeah, I have to say, if you go to all the church bazaar craft sales for Christmas, people find you. Because I had that experience this weekend. So I think some guidance around, I mean, I'm just really careful to just sort of reiterate what we had talked about as a board at the last meeting. It would be helpful to have some, like, what are we saying? How are we saying it? Just being really thoughtful.
It's a good idea.
And I think just everyone keep in mind that, a well-attended meeting probably means more conversations about what we talk about. And I think that all of us are pretty clear that we were presented with what would happen if it was very much an if kind of scenario that we needed to understand so that we could let other people understand.
Yes.
And we haven't passed anything. We haven't cut anything. That has not happened.
I really hope the community understands just how exploratory it was.
So with that, next meeting, Wednesday, January 8th, and please do expect a special meeting in January. If there's nothing more, we adjourn at 9:25. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.